My name is Su Yunwan. I live in Manhwa village with my grandmother, who raised me after my parents died when I was young. This is my second life. I was reborn 2 days ago, and I quickly realized I'm not the only one. My cousin Su Yunwan seems to have been reborn too. Here's what happened. I was originally engaged to a scholar named Li Zian, and my cousin was engaged to a hunter named Scumbag. But my cousin overheard something, or rather, she dreamed it. She learned that Li Zian is actually the lost son of a noble family, the Pingyang marquis, and that he'd eventually be taken back to live in wealth. So she wanted to steal my fiancé. To make it happen, she fell into the river this morning and got rescued by Li Zian. Now everyone says they've been too close, so she has to marry him instead of me. My uncle and his wife came to my grandmother, demanding we swap engagements. But here's the thing, I don't even want Li Zian anymore. In my past life, I married him and followed him to that noble household.
It was a nightmare.
Those rich families will eat you alive. If I hadn't luckily gained a special space, I would have died there without knowing how.
And Li Zian?
He wasn't worth trusting with my life. So my motto this time around is simple: protect my life and stay far away from terrible men. When I walked in and agreed to the swap, everyone was shocked. My grandmother thought I was being bullied, but I told her it was my own choice. She reluctantly agreed. My Aunt Lu Hua was thrilled and rushed off to tell both families. But I stopped her. If we're swapping fiancés, we should swap the bride prices too. The hunter's family had given 10 silver taels for my cousin, a generous amount. Li Zian's family only gave 2 taels for me. My aunt's face dropped instantly. She didn't want to give up that money, but my grandmother backed me up. Fair is fair. Aunt Lu didn't want to give up the 10 taels, of course. She tried to argue that all the bride price money stays in the Su family anyway, so why bother swapping it? But my grandmother shut that down fast. She made it clear my bride price would go with me as part of my dowry. Aunt Lu had no choice. She handed over 8 taels, and with the 2 taels from the Li family already in our hands, that made 10. Within an hour, Aunt Lu had visited both families and settled everything. The wedding date stayed the same, 3 days from now. Only now, I would marry the hunter Scumbag, and my cousin Shuang would marry Li Zian. Before the wedding, Grandma called me to her room and opened a locked wooden box. She took out a beautiful jade pendant, my mother's, from her wedding dowry. My mother died when I was little, so Grandma had been keeping it safe for me all these years. She hung it around my neck herself. Then she gave me the 10 taels of bride price money, plus over 20 taels she had secretly saved up for my dowry. She even gave me a pair of silver bracelets. She had planned to give one to me and one to my cousin, but since Shuang stole my engagement, Grandma gave me both as compensation. Watching her fuss over me like that, I felt so happy and so sad at the same time. In my past life, Grandma died of illness less than half a year after I got married. And the worst part? I didn't discover the jade pendant secret until after she was gone. If I had known sooner, I could have saved her. That was the biggest regret of my entire life. I hugged her tight and told her she had to stay alive and healthy so I could take care of her. See, this jade pendant isn't just jewelry. In my previous life, Li Zian tried to take it from me to sell for money. We struggled over it and my hand got cut on a splinter. When my blood touched the pendant, it glowed with golden light, and I was suddenly transported to another place, a magical space with a healing spring, a small river, farmland, a huge storage building, and a 3-story library. It was like a hidden world inside the pendant. Li Zian saw me vanish and thought I was a ghost. When I reappeared, he screamed. In my panic, I grabbed him and pulled him into the space too. He drank the spring water, and it made him incredibly smart and strong. That's how he later passed the top imperial exams and inherited the marquis title. In a way, my pendant made his whole success possible. This time, I also accepted all of Grandma's dowry money without hesitation. In my past life, I had refused it, thinking Grandma needed money for her own safety. But right after I married, my uncle and aunt stole her savings, and the shock made her so sick she never recovered. We both knew they were the thieves, but we could never prove it. By taking the money now, I'm actually protecting Grandma. There's nothing left for them to steal. After Grandma went to rest, I went back to my room, pricked my finger with a needle, and dripped my blood onto the jade pendant. This time, I'm not waiting. This time, I'm getting my space back early. The golden light surrounded me again, and just like that, I was back inside the jade pendant space. Everything looked the same as it did at the very beginning of my last life. The spirit farmland was still wild and unplowed. The spring water was crystal clear. The library was full of brand new books. The storage building was half empty, half packed with treasures, gold, silver, food, gorgeous jewelry, beautiful fabrics, and most importantly, seeds. Those seeds were special. In my past life, I had tried growing them. Most were crops that don't exist in our country, things labeled corn, potatoes, and sweet potatoes that produce unbelievable amounts of food. There were fruit seeds too, and every packet came with detailed instructions on how to grow them. Last time, Li Zian took credit for these seeds, gifting them to the emperor one by one, and that's how he built his wealth and power.
Not this time.
I walked over to the grass hut by the river, poured myself a cup of spring water, and drank it. Almost immediately, my body reacted. Dark, oily grime oozed out of my skin, and the smell was awful. This was the spring water purifying my body, just like before. I hurried to the rest area and used the magical bathroom. Water fell from above at whatever temperature I wanted, and there were little bottles of body wash and shampoo that smelled like sweet osmanthus flowers. After I cleaned up, I felt like a completely different person, lighter, sharper, more alive. In the mirror, my skin had turned fair and smooth, almost glowing, and my hair was darker and thicker. I've always had good features for my parents, but farm life made my skin rough and dark. Now I look too different. To avoid suspicion, I used some of the cosmetics in the space to tone down my appearance so the change wouldn't be so obvious. Time moves differently in the space. 10 days inside equals 1 day outside. I'd spent over an hour in there, but only about 15 minutes had passed in the real world. I went back to Grandma's room. She woke up when she heard my footsteps, so I poured her a cup of water and secretly added 1 drop of spring water. I couldn't give her too much. The spring water is powerful, and her old body might not handle it well. She needed slow, careful healing. Grandma drank it all and said she felt strangely comfortable, better than usual. She thought it was just from her nap. She also noticed I looked prettier, but didn't think much of it. What I didn't know then was that Grandma had actually been making my skin rough on purpose all these years. She knew a beautiful girl from a poor family with no connections could attract dangerous attention, so she'd taken me out in the sun to darken and roughen my skin. She'd been protecting me all along. I told Grandma I was worried about leaving her alone with my uncle and aunt after I married. Those two only ever treated her well because they wanted her money. Now that she'd given everything to me, I was afraid they'd mistreat her. Grandma tried to brush it off, saying she'd report them to the authorities if they dared. But I knew she was just trying not to worry me. I suggested she separate from them completely, live on her own. What I really wanted was to bring her to live with me, but I knew she was too proud for that. And I hadn't even met Scumbag yet. Showing up to a marriage with my grandmother in tow might not go over well. I planned to talk to him about it first. If he refused, I'd just call off the wedding and live with Grandma myself. After everything I went through in my last life, I had zero hope left for marriage anyway. Grandma told me to focus on my own wedding first, and that she'd think about it. I decided to visit Scumbag's house, partly hoping to talk to him, partly to meet my future mother-in-law and sister-in-law. His family lived on the east side of the village, right next door to Li Zian's house, separated by just 1 wall. When I got there, before I could even knock, I overheard a conversation from the Li family's yard. Li Zian's mother was asking him if he minded the wife swap. His answer? I don't care who I marry. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly to myself. Of course, he didn't care. To Li Zian, a wife was never anything more than a decoration. I didn't want to hear another word from the Li family, so I knocked on the He family's gate. To my surprise, Scumbag himself answered the door. I have to admit, the man was impressive. Tall, strong, with sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. His weak-colored skin hinted at solid muscle underneath his clothes. He looked like someone who could make you feel safe just by standing next to you. No wonder my cousin had been so desperate to marry him in her past life. That face alone could win a girl over. He caught me staring and cleared his throat awkwardly. "Are you here to see me?" I pulled myself together. "I came to talk to you about something." His mother and sister were out, so he suggested we walk and talk instead of going inside. He didn't want to risk people gossiping about us being alone together.
I appreciated that.
He was thoughtful, the kind of person who considers how things affect others.
Good sign.
We walked toward the foot of the mountain, where fewer villagers would see us. I didn't see any reason to beat around the bush, so I was direct. "You know my situation. My parents died when I was young, and my grandmother raised me. I don't trust my uncle and aunt. I'm worried that once I'm married, they'll treat her badly. So I want to ask, after we're married, can I still go back every day to check on her and bring her food?" I made sure to add that I'd pay for everything myself from my own dowry and embroidery income. I didn't want the He family bearing any extra burden. Then I stood there and waited. If he said no, I was ready to call off the wedding entirely. "I have no problem with that," he said, just like that. Simple and straightforward. He even seemed to respect me more for caring about my grandmother. I was surprised. I'd been fully prepared for a rejection, and he just agreed without hesitation. I couldn't help thinking about what happened to him in my past life. After he married my cousin Shuang, he got injured hunting in the mountains. Shuang despised him for not being able to earn money, so she started sleeping with the village chief's son. Then, egged on by her lover, she secretly sold He Xiangbei's little sister and ran off with the money. I felt a pang of sympathy for him. This time, if he treated me well, I'd do my best to help his family avoid that terrible fate. Of course, with both me and Shuang reborn, the future was uncertain. Things had already changed. I could only take it one step at a time. I gave him a proper curtsy of thanks and headed home. When I got back and walked into the courtyard, I noticed my bedroom door was slightly ajar. I always shut it tightly, a habit since childhood. Someone had been inside. I pushed the door open and found exactly who I expected: Aunt Lu and cousin Shuang, rummaging through my wardrobe. "What are you doing?" I asked. They flinched, but relaxed once they saw it was just me. Shuang recovered quickly. "Oh, we were just helping you organize your things for the wedding so you won't be in a rush." What a lovely excuse. Not even a ghost would believe it. I smiled instead of getting angry.
How kind of you.
"Since you're helping me pack, it's only fair I return the favor. Let me go tidy up your room too, Shuang." I turned and walked toward her room without looking back. She panicked, chased after me, and grabbed my arm. "There's no need. I barely have any dowry. Mother already packed everything." I shook her off and kept walking. Shuang shot her mother a look, a signal to keep searching my room, and then ran after me. I walked straight into her room and, copying exactly what they'd been doing to mine, yanked apart her neatly folded bedding and tossed it aside. "Two can play this game." I kept going. Right in front of Shuang's shocked face, I opened her wardrobe and yanked everything out onto the floor: her poorly sewn wedding dress, her few pieces of clothing, and some embroidery pieces that looked very familiar. They should look familiar. I made them myself. They were pieces I hadn't had the chance to sell at the embroidery shop in town yet. Shuang finally snapped. "Su Yunwan, what do you think you're doing?" I smiled at her coolly. "Just helping you tidy up, the same way you and your mother were helping me." Then I picked up my stolen embroidery and folded it neatly. "Oh look, my missing needlework. It's been here all along. Should I thank you for keeping it safe for me?" The nerve of this girl. In my past life, she'd sabotaged me over and over and nearly ruined my reputation. I hadn't forgotten any of it. But I wasn't going to give her a quick punishment. I wanted her to taste every bitter fruit life had to offer. That's real revenge. Shuang crossed her arms smugly. "If you want your embroidery back, forget a thank you. Pay me a storage fee." I almost laughed. What an idiot. "Sure," I said. "Let's go ask the village chief how much a storage fee should be for stolen goods." I grabbed her arm and started dragging her toward the gate. After drinking the spirit spring water, I was much stronger than before. She couldn't break free no matter how hard she tried. She started screaming, "Mother!
Help!
Su Yunwan is bullying me." Aunt Lu came flying out of my room, where she'd been searching through my things, of course, and lunged at me, claws out, going straight for my face. "You ungrateful little wretch! How dare you bully my daughter?" By then, Grandma had heard the noise and come outside. She arrived just in time to see me lift my foot and kick Aunt Lu to the ground. The woman was bigger and stronger than me from years of farm work, but the spirit water had changed things. Aunt Lu sat on the ground wailing. This girl I raised and fed dares to hit me. No respect for her elders. She got up and charged at me again, but Grandma shouted at her to stop. Aunt Lu ignored her and kept coming, so I pulled Shuang in front of me like a shield. Aunt Lu's clawing hand raked right across her own daughter's face. "My face," Shuang shrieked. Blood marks appeared across her cheeks. Aunt Lu froze, her hand hanging in the air. "I didn't mean to. I was trying to scratch that little wretch." Grandma walked over, and Aunt Lu knew she couldn't attack me anymore with her mother-in-law standing right there. So she did what she does best. She dropped to the ground and started her performance. "I can't live like this. My mother-in-law bullies me. The niece I raised bullies me. I'll just die." She got up and ran toward the doorframe as if she was going to smash her head against it. Shuang tried to rush after her, but I grabbed her arm again. "Su Yunwan, you're heartless. You won't even let me save my own mother," she said it loud, making sure the growing crowd of nosy neighbors at the gate could hear. I didn't move. I just held on and watched. Grandma started to worry at first, but then she noticed I wasn't reacting and quickly figured it out. Sure enough, Aunt Lu ran toward the doorframe and hit the brakes at the last second. Nobody had chased after her. Nobody had tried to stop her. She turned around. Shuang was standing there with bloody scratches on her face, looking helpless. Grandma and I were just watching, completely unbothered. I even mouthed the words at her. "Go ahead and do it. Nobody's stopping you." So she sat back down and resumed crying. The same lines on repeat. She wanted to die. Everyone bullied her. Her life was so hard. I let go of Shuang, pulled up a chair for Grandma, and stood beside her. We watched the show together. The neighbors gathered outside our gate were whispering and pointing, trying to piece together the drama. Some already knew about the engagement swap. Others were wondering what all the fuss was about. Grandma sat there watching Aunt Lu wail for about 15 minutes before she finally lost patience.
Enough.
"If you want to die, go ahead. Nobody's stopping you." Aunt Lu looked stunned. "How can you say that?" "I bore children for this family," Grandma snorted. "You're the one who kept saying you wanted to die." That shut her up. Of course, she didn't actually want to die. She was about to become the mother-in-law of a future marquis. She had a lifetime of luxury to look forward to. The whole performance was just for the audience. Grandma turned to me and asked what happened. I told her everything plainly. How I came home and found Aunt Lu and Shuang going through my wardrobe, and how I found my missing embroidery pieces in Shuang's room. Grandma's face went cold. "Explain yourselves." Aunt Lu dodged the question about the stolen embroidery entirely, sticking to her story about helping me pack. Grandma wasn't buying it. She pointed out that my room looked like it had been robbed, not tidied. The crowd could see into my room from the gate. People started muttering about Aunt Lu and Shuang's behavior. What I didn't know at the time was that both my future mother-in-law, Mrs. Su, and Shuang's future mother-in-law, Mrs. Zhao, were in that crowd.
Mrs. Su was relieved.
She was thinking how lucky it was that the swap happened. Otherwise, a girl like Shuang would have married into her family. She watched me handle the whole situation calmly and was impressed. I could tell she approved. Mrs. Zhao, on the other hand, was miserable. She had her own dark reasons for wanting Li Zian to marry. He couldn't actually perform as a husband, so she planned to have his younger brother secretly take his place on the wedding night, so the Li family could still have an heir. She'd been happy with me as the bride because I was hardworking and had embroidery skills. Now she was stuck with Shuang and her scratched-up face. She was furious but too nosy to leave. Grandma told me to go check if anything was missing from my room. I knew nothing was actually gone, All my valuables were safely hidden in my jade pendant space. But I wasn't about to let this chance slip by. I went inside, pretended to search around, then came out looking devastated. Grandma, the dowry money you gave me is gone. Grandma's face went white. That was decades of her savings. She was shaken. This was my plan. I knew it would upset her, and I felt terrible about that. But if my uncle and aunt believed Grandma had no more money, they'd lose interest in living with her and would want to split the household. Then I could take care of Grandma openly. Aunt Lou panicked too, but for a different reason. You're lying. I searched every corner of your room. There wasn't a single coin. I put on my most heartbroken expression. Auntie, please give the money back. I agreed to swap engagements for Shuang's sake, without complaint. Grandma gave me that money, so I'd have something to fall back on at my husband's house. I saw you and Shuang searching my room with my own eyes. Money doesn't just grow legs and walk away. Then I turned to Grandma, my eyes brimming with tears. I wasn't even going to keep it. I was planning to secretly return it to you before the wedding. Now it's gone. The crowd erupted. People started shouting at Aunt Lou to return the money. Someone warned her that if this went to the magistrate, her whole family's reputation would be destroyed. Right in the middle of all this righteous anger, my uncle Su Taiju came walking up the road with my cousin Su Qingyang, hose over their shoulders. He saw the crowd at our gate and started walking faster. My uncle Su Taiju walked into the yard to find Aunt Lou on the ground, arguing with everyone that she didn't steal my money. When she saw him, she crawled over and grabbed his pant leg, crying for him to defend her. Before my uncle could even speak, his 10-year-old son Xingyang stepped forward, glaring at me. You're framing my mother. I'll kill you. He picked up a small hoe and swung it at my head. Grandma screamed for me to dodge. I moved aside easily enough. In my past life, I'd spent years alone in the space and taught myself a fighting technique from the library. I could handle a little boy. But before I could even throw a punch, a tall figure appeared out of nowhere, grabbed Xingyang by the collar, and flung him a full 10 feet. The boy crashed to the ground, hoe and all, and started bawling. I straightened up to find Xiangbei standing in front of me like a tower. Are you okay? He didn't hurt you, did he? Apparently his sister Xiao had run home to tell him about the commotion at our house, and he'd come to watch. He arrived just in time to see Xingyang swing at me, and acted on instinct. I smiled at him gratefully.
I've fine.
Thank you. He nodded and left the yard without another word. I noticed Shuang glaring daggers at his back. I knew why. In her past life, she'd married Xiangbei, and it had been a disaster from day one. On their wedding night, she'd ordered his little sister to bring her foot-washing water, and he'd scolded her harshly. She argued back, and he refused to consummate the marriage. He never warmed up to her. He'd look at her like she was something dirty, then disappear into the mountains for days. He never once shared her bed, all the way until she sold his sister and ran off with another man. Yet here he was, rushing to protect me. That clearly bothered her. Once Xiangbei was gone, my uncle suddenly found his courage. He hadn't dared say a word while that mountain of a man was standing there. Now he turned on me. Getting married has made you bold, hasn't it? You don't respect this family anymore? I hid behind Grandma, playing scared. Uncle, Aunt Lou, and Shuang stole my dowry money. How am I the one disrespecting anyone? Grandma told him coldly to make his wife and daughter return the money if he still considered her his mother. He turned to Aunt Lou to check the story, and she shook her head desperately, insisting she hadn't taken anything. Shuang jumped in to help her mother. You searched my room too. How do you explain that? I held up my recovered embroidery pieces, looking as pitiful as I could. I only went to your room to get back my stolen needlework. You messed up your own room to frame me. I wasn't worried about her accusations. I'd been in the courtyard the whole time after leaving her room. Everyone could see I had nothing on me but the embroidery. The crowd got impatient with all the back and forth and suggested calling the village chief to settle things. Someone fetched him quickly. Village Chief Zhang Fugue arrived, a sharp-looking man in his 40s who clearly didn't enjoy dealing with family squabbles but had no choice with so many eyes on him. He heard Aunt Lou's tearful version first, then asked me for mine. I told him everything calmly and clearly, coming home to find them searching my room, discovering my stolen embroidery in Shuang's wardrobe, then finding my dowry money gone. The chief could tell I wasn't lying. He turned to Aunt Lu. "If you don't want this to get any uglier, just return the money." Aunt Lu kept insisting she hadn't taken my money, but the village chief wasn't having it. I suggested they search her room to settle things once and for all. The chief picked a few women from the crowd to do the search. They came back quickly, holding a pouch of silver. It looked about the same amount as the dowry Grandma had given me. "That's my missing dowry money," I said. Aunt Lu lost it completely. "That's mine. My husband and I saved that our whole lives." She lunged for the pouch, but the woman holding it tossed it to me first. Then Aunt Lu charged at me. I ducked behind the village chief. She crashed right into him and scratched up his face. He was furious. He cursed her out, told everyone to go home, and left to treat his wounds. Aunt Lu sat in the yard crying until dark, but she never got her money back. That night, Shuang asked her mother if the money really wasn't stolen from my room. Aunt Lu spat and said it was their life savings. Shuang was horrified. It meant she had no dowry either. They started arguing. Aunt Lu forgot all about Li Zian being a future marquis and told Shuang she'd chosen this marriage herself. My uncle finally yelled at both of them to shut up. They all hated me now, especially Shuang, who was already fantasizing about making me suffer once she became powerful. I hadn't originally planned to go this far. My real enemy was Shuang, not her parents. But Aunt Lu walked right into it by ransacking my room, and I wasn't the kind of person to let that slide anymore. Taking her savings was both punishment and strategy. Once my uncle and aunt realized Grandma had no more money, they'd have no reason to keep pretending to be dutiful. They'd want to split the household, and Grandma would be free. That evening, I went to Grandma's room feeling a little nervous. She was sitting quietly in the dark. She understood everything. She knew exactly what I'd done and why. "I know you're looking out for me," she said. "But that woman holds grudges. This could cause you trouble later." I told her she should separate from them and live on her own. I'd already talked to Scumbag, and he didn't mind me looking after her. She refused. But before we could argue further, the door burst open. My uncle and aunt stormed in. "Since you don't treat me like a son," my uncle said, "don't expect me to act like one anymore." The threat was obvious. Return the money, or he'd cut ties. I decided to let Grandma make the call. If she wanted to stay with them, I'd give the silver back without hesitation. Grandma looked at her own son with tears in her eyes. Then she said, her voice cold and steady, "Then I have no son." I could tell how much it hurt her. She'd carried him for 9 months, raised him, and all he'd ever done was scheme to get her money. A son who only cared about profit and had no real love for his mother. She was done. My uncle hadn't expected that. He'd been sure she'd cave. When she didn't, he set his jaw.
"Fine.
Tomorrow morning, go to the village chief yourself. We're splitting the household." Grandma turned away so he wouldn't see her pain.
Fine.
"I'll go first thing in the morning." My uncle and aunt hadn't expected Grandma to actually agree to split the household. They'd only come to her room to scare her into making me return the money. It backfired completely. Aunt Lu tried one last angle. She reminded Grandma that their family had no money left and asked her to be generous with the split. Grandma had already made up her mind. She told them they could keep the house, the courtyard, and all 8 acres of farmland. She'd take nothing but her personal belongings. My uncle looked uncomfortable for a moment, maybe a flicker of guilt. But before he could say anything, Aunt Lu cut in. "Thank you so much, Mother. We'll definitely take care of you once we're doing well." She was terrified he'd offer Grandma some kind of allowance. In her mind, every coin was meant for her precious son's education. I bit my tongue. Grandma had offered this herself, so I couldn't argue. Besides, I'd be the one taking care of her from now on. She wouldn't go without. Grandma added one condition. She would stay in the house until after my wedding and the traditional 3rd-day visit home. If they didn't agree, the split was off. Aunt Lu agreed instantly, afraid Grandma might change her mind. After they left, I slipped 2 pouches of silver out of my space. "Grandma, take this. You'll need to buy a place in the village. She took only one pouch, the one we'd taken from Aunt Lou's room. I'll consider this my son's filial contribution, she said dryly. That was her share of the family split. I put the rest back and didn't push it. Our money was shared between us anyway. Whatever I kept, I'd spend on her. The next morning, Aunt Lou couldn't wait. She came knocking before breakfast, rushing us to the village chief's house. Chief Zhang was surprised. In all his years, he'd never seen a mother and her only son split their household. He clearly thought poorly of my uncle for it, but since Grandma insisted, he wrote up the documents. Both sides pressed their thumbprints, and it was done. My uncle made a show of inviting Grandma back for breakfast. She refused flatly. We're separate households now. I'll cook for myself. Aunt Lou tugged my uncle's sleeve and they left, making sure the chief noticed it was Grandma who'd turned them down, not the other way around. Once they were gone, I asked the chief if there were any houses for sale in the village. He thought carefully and suggested the old Chin family courtyard on the east side. It was small, not too run down, and best of all, only one house away from the He family. That meant I could look after Grandma easily after my wedding. It was exactly the place Grandma had been thinking of too. The chief took us over to the Chin family, and Grandma bought it for 7 taels of silver. We paid the Chin family for the house, and the village chief just needed to go to town to get the deed officially stamped. I slipped him a piece of silver for his trouble, and he had the paperwork done by the next day. With the deed in hand, Grandma reminded me that my wedding was tomorrow. She said even though she'd given me dowry money, it wouldn't look right to show up at my husband's house with nothing visible. She suggested we go to town to shop. I noticed something wonderful. Grandma seemed healthier than she'd been in years. Her eyes were clearer, her legs felt strong, and she had energy to spare. She didn't know it, but that was because I'd been secretly adding drops of spirit spring water to her drinks ever since I activated the jade pendant space. It was already working. We caught the ox cart into town with some village women. Everyone knew about the family split by now. They looked at Grandma with sympathy, but also kindness. Andy Wong, the woman who tossed me the money pouch during the incident, told Grandma to ask for help anytime she needed it. Others chimed in too. It warmed my heart. There really are more good people in this world than bad. In town, Grandma bought me 2 red wooden chests, the kind families commonly give as part of a bride's dowry. She also picked out some fabric to line the bottom of the chests. When she wanted to head to the jewelry shop next, I stopped her. I had more beautiful jewelry in my space than any shop could offer, and I didn't want her spending what little money she had left. The chests and fabric had already cost 6 or 7 taels. I had treasures in my space worth fortunes, but I couldn't sell any of them. A poor village girl showing up with priceless goods would attract exactly the wrong kind of attention. I hadn't figured out a good way to earn money yet either. My embroidery skills were excellent. In my past life, I'd learned advanced techniques from books in the space library, but fine embroidery takes months to complete. It wasn't a quick solution. After my shopping was done, I switched to buying things for Grandma's new house, small household items she'd need. We spent a good while in town getting everything sorted, then rode the ox cart home. We went straight to Grandma's new courtyard instead of back to the old Su house. When we arrived, I saw someone already inside, busy at work.
It was Scumbag.
He'd just climbed down a ladder from the roof. When he turned and saw us, he scratched his head and blushed a little. My mother said the house needed some fixing up before anyone could live in it, so she sent me over to take care of it. I looked around. The broken parts of the roof were covered with fresh straw. Cracks in the walls had been sealed with mud. All the window paper had been replaced. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid. Wind and rain wouldn't get through. I'd been worrying about who I could ask to help with repairs, and here he'd gone and done it all without being asked. "Thank you," I said, and I truly meant it. "You've helped me so much." Grandma studied him with fresh eyes. She'd known he was capable, a young man who hunted in the mountains to support his widowed mother and little sister. But she hadn't expected him to be so thoughtful. The more she looked at him, the more she liked him. "You're a good young man," she told him. "Come visit often. I'll cook for you and Yunwan. I've got some real skills in the kitchen." That was true. Grandma was an excellent cook. She just hadn't had the ingredients to show it in years. Scumbag didn't linger. He told Grandma to let him know if anything else needed fixing, then shouldered his ladder and left. He was a man of few words, especially around me. After he was gone, Grandma squeezed my hand with a big smile. That young man has good character. Marry him and build a good life together. I wasn't the type to judge someone on first impressions anymore, not after everything I'd been through. But I knew one thing for certain. Just about anyone was better than Li Zian. I played along. Grandma always has good judgment about people. If you say he's good, he must be. She gave me a look. Oh, so now you trust my judgment? You wouldn't listen when I told you Li Zian was no good. Fair point. When we got back to the old Su house, we caught my uncle in the act. He was hauling one of my new red wooden chests toward Shuang's room. Grandma shouted at him, and he was so startled he tripped and went flying over the chest, landing face first on the ground. Aunt Lu came out scolding him for being clumsy, then froze when she saw us standing there. She kicked the chest and sneered, "Who wants your stupid box anyway?" But we all knew she did. I carried the chest to my room and packed my dowry items inside. Grandma stayed with me that night. Neither of us slept much. Just like in my past life, she spent the whole night giving me advice. Be good to your mother-in-law, be kind to your sister-in-law, build a real life with Scumbag. Then she pulled out a little yellowed booklet from her shirt and handed it to me. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. My face went hot. In my previous life, I'd never been intimate with Li Zian. He was physically incapable. I'd lived my whole life without that experience. But Scumbag was a normal, healthy man. This time would be different. The thought made me nervous, but I talked myself through it. Marriage means sharing a life, having children of my own. That would be a complete life. The nervousness faded. By dawn, we were both already awake. Grandma went to the kitchen and boiled 4 eggs. 2 for each of us. Eggs were a luxury in our household. She'd normally never waste them. But today was my wedding day. After eating, Grandma helped me put up my hair. I'm not someone who needs to show off, but I knew Shuang would come by to flaunt herself before her own wedding. Remembering her smug face from my past life, I decided I wasn't going to let her have that satisfaction. While Grandma's back was turned, I slipped into my space and picked out a golden hairpin set with a red gemstone, a stunning piece from the storage room. Grandma noticed it immediately. Where did that come from? I'd been thinking about this for days. I needed to tell her about the jade pendant space. I couldn't keep hiding it. Strange things would keep happening, and no lie I made up would fool her. She was the person I trusted most in both my lifetimes. She deserved to know the truth. So, I made up my mind. Today, I would tell her everything. I decided it was time. I took Grandma's hand and warned her that what she was about to see would be hard to believe. "Don't be scared," I said. Then, I brought her into the jade pendant space. Her eyes went wide, just like Li Zian's had in my past life, though she handled it far better than he ever did. I explained everything as simply as I could. The pendant was my mother's, and when my blood touched it, it bonded to me and unlocked this hidden world left behind by immortals. What surprised me was how quickly Grandma accepted it all. After I walked her through the space, the spring, the farmland, the library, the storage room full of treasures, she grabbed my hand and said firmly, "This place is too powerful. You must keep it secret. If the wrong person finds out, it will bring disaster." I already knew that. In my past life, only Li Zian knew about it, and as terrible as he was, at least he'd helped keep the secret because it benefited him too. This time, I told Grandma because she was the person I trusted most in either lifetime. She deserved to enjoy everything the space could offer. As for Scumbag, I'd wait and see what kind of man he truly was. If he proved trustworthy, I'd tell him eventually. Living together, it would be nearly impossible to hide forever. But if he turned out to be someone I couldn't rely on, I'd keep the secret, leave the marriage, and live with Grandma. The space could provide for both of us easily. Grandma was thrilled when she realized the spring water was why she'd been feeling so much better lately. She figured she could live another 10 years at least, maybe even help raise my future children. Then her eyes landed on the half-acre of farmland, and I could practically see the plans forming in her head. She was already thinking about planting crops, raising chickens and ducks by the river, maybe even building a pig pen. In my past life, I'd tried keeping chickens in the space, but the smell was awful and I gave up. If I'd known Grandma was already planning a full pig farm, I would have laughed and cried at the same time. But if it made her happy, I wouldn't say no. Through the little invisible window in the space, it lets you see and hear the outside world. I heard Aunt Lu greeting guests. She'd invited Grandma's old sister-in-law, Mrs. Wang, a woman Grandma had never gotten along with. Aunt Lu had clearly called her here on purpose to upset Grandma on my wedding day. She'd also invited her own family. None of these people had anything to do with us, and we didn't need to go out and greet them. But with so many people in the house, we couldn't stay hidden in the space. Someone might barge in and find the room empty. So we left the space, and I brought out some of the cosmetics from storage. They were 1,000 times better than anything sold in town. The makeup looked beautiful and completely natural. I'd spent a long time in my past life learning how to use them. I realized that after tonight, I wouldn't be sleeping alone anymore. Once I washed my face, my real appearance would be impossible to hide from Scumbag. So I decided to stop holding back. I sat before the small bronze mirror and did my makeup properly. In my red wedding dress with its fine embroidery, paired with the golden ruby hairpin, I looked, well, even Grandma stared. She was just about to place the red veil over my head when the door was shoved open rudely. Shuang walked in, also dressed in red. If you could ignore the scabbed-over scratches on her face, she was actually pretty. Her embroidery wasn't as fine as mine, and she only had an old silver hairpin instead of gold. But she was still a good-looking girl. Too bad her heart was rotten. Just as I expected, Shuang came to gloat. She'd found nothing valuable when she ransacked my room, so she assumed I didn't even have a decent wedding outfit. She was coming to rub my face in it. She opened her mouth to mock me, then stopped dead. She stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. You're Su Yunwan. I nearly laughed. Who else would I be? She couldn't process it. She kept muttering to herself, how could my skin be so fair? How is this possible? She simply refused to accept what she was seeing. Grandma scolded her for barging in on my wedding day instead of staying in her own room. But Shuang didn't care about Grandma's authority anymore. She just stood there glaring at me like she wanted to bore holes through my body. I wasn't about to let that slide. I stood up slowly and walked toward her. Are you jealous, Shuang? Jealous that I'm prettier than you? That my dress is finer? That my jewelry is better? Is everything I have something you wish you had? I clicked my tongue. Take my advice, being petty like that is a sickness. You should get it treated, she sputtered. Why would I be jealous of you? I could tell she was dying to say something about becoming a marquis's wife someday, but she couldn't reveal that secret. I just smiled and stared pointedly at the scab marks on her face. If you're not jealous, then why the attitude? She stammered. I just don't like looking at you. I'm not gold or silver, I said. I can't please everyone. Whether you like looking at me is really not my concern. Her face turned dark with rage, making those scratches look even worse. I honestly wished I could paint a portrait of her right then and capture the moment. She stomped her foot. We'll see about this, Su Yunwan. Then she stormed out. Grandma sighed after she left. That girl is becoming more and more like her mother. I knew it saddened her. Shuang was still her granddaughter. But there was nothing anyone could do. That girl's cruelty ran bone deep. I sat on the bed and put on my red veil. Grandma went out to greet guests. Even though she'd split from my uncle's family, many people were here out of respect for her. She sent in my childhood friend Zhou Yingxue to keep me company. Yingxue was a year younger than me, sweet and gentle. She'd recently gotten engaged to the village chief's son, Zhang Wang, with a wedding planned for year's end. Seeing her alive made my heart ache. In my past life, shortly after Yingxue married Zhang Wang, he ran off with Shuang. He never came back. Yingxue fell into such deep despair that she died of illness within a few years. I only learned about it when I returned to the village to visit Grandma's grave. I didn't know if I could change her fate this time around, but I wanted to try. Yingxue held my hand and congratulated me. Then she told me something I hadn't known. 3 years ago, her older brother had been beaten and left in the street after accidentally breaking a flower pot at his employer's house. Scumbag happened to be in town, selling his game, found her brother, carried him to a clinic, paid for his treatment out of his own pocket, and then went back to the village to notify her father. The family still owed him that money, and Scumbag had never once asked for it back. If he wasn't truly kind, Ingshua said, why would anyone let that much silver go without saying a word? She quickly added that her father planned to repay him after the autumn harvest. I appreciated her telling me. It was one more sign that maybe, this time, I'd chosen the right person. Ingshua and I were still chatting when someone outside shouted, "The grooms are here." In our village, weddings are simple. Usually the groom just walks over with a red silk ribbon and leads the bride home. Sometimes, if the family wants to show respect, they'll hire a small sedan chair. In my past life, Grandma had secretly given Li Zian money to hire a sedan chair for me because she didn't want people laughing at me for marrying a useless scholar. I hadn't known about that at the time. I'd thought the Li family actually valued me. I remembered how jealous Shuang had been, seeing that little red sedan. Grandma came to my room to walk me out. I couldn't see her face behind my red veil, but her hand was trembling when she took mine. She wiped away tears and told me to focus on my new life and not worry about her. I held back my own tears and asked Ingshua to look after Grandma for the next 2 days. According to custom, a new bride couldn't visit her family until the 3rd day homecoming. Ingshua promised right away. Aunt Lu and Shuang came out at the same time. Aunt Lu spotted a red sedan chair among the wedding parties outside and practically dragged Shuang toward it, shoving past Grandma and me to get there first. She was beaming. Shuang had told her that in her dream, the Li family had hired a sedan chair. This had to be it. A neighbor tried to warn her. You're going to the wrong group. That's the He family's party. Aunt Lu snapped at them. Nonsense. The Li family hired the sedan because they value my Shuang. You're just jealous. The neighbor gave up. Aunt Lu reached for the sedan door, and a large hand blocked her. It was Scumbag, standing on the other side of the chair in his red wedding clothes. You've come to the wrong place, he said. Aunt Lu's face froze. She couldn't believe it. Scumbag's sister Xiao walked over and pointed her toward the other wedding party, the Li family's, which had no sedan chair at all. Aunt Lu kept insisting there must be a mistake. The whole crowd burst out laughing. My uncle saw the commotion from the gate, his face dark with fury. He marched over and dragged Aunt Lu and Shuang toward the correct and much simpler Li family procession. I couldn't see any of this from behind my veil, but I could hear everything. Shuang must have been seething. In her past life, the He family hadn't hired a sedan chair, and the Li family had because Grandma had secretly paid for it. This time, everything was reversed, and she couldn't figure out why. What she didn't understand was simple. The sedan chair last time had nothing to do with the Li family valuing anyone. It was my grandmother's love, spent on the wrong groom. Aunt Lu's blunder at the sedan chair set off a chain reaction. Li Zian was furious. He'd only agreed to marry in the first place to hide the fact that his body was defective, and now his mother-in-law had publicly humiliated him before the wedding even started. When Shuang and her parents finally made their way to the correct procession, Li Zian didn't even bother greeting them. He tossed one end of the red silk ribbon in Shuang's direction and turned to leave without waiting for her. The silk slipped right out of her hand and dragged along the ground behind him. My uncle's face turned every color imaginable. He called out to Li Zian, his voice tight with anger. "Is this how you treat your bride?" That was the spark Li Zian needed. He spun around and let loose. "Your wife just made it perfectly clear she thinks my family is beneath her. She didn't even look at our procession. She went straight to the He family's sedan chair. You forced this marriage on me after your daughter threw herself into the river, and I had to save her. I agreed to the swap, and now you act like I'm not good enough? Does the world revolve around the Su family?" He had a point, and everyone knew it. The crowd murmured in agreement. My uncle was so humiliated he nearly called the whole thing off. "Then this marriage is..." But Aunt Lu grabbed him before he could finish. Shuang jumped in too, calling Li Zian her lifesaver, desperately trying to salvage the situation. Aunt Lu swallowed her pride and approached Li Zian with a smile, blaming the whole thing on He Xiangbei's position near the sedan blocking her view. Poor He Xiangbei, minding his own business and somehow catching the blame. Li Zian's brother whispered something in his ear, and he reluctantly turned around and picked up the silk ribbon again. The Li family's people grabbed Shuang's only piece of dowry, a single bedding set, and carried it on their shoulders. Li Zian glanced at it with visible disgust. Grandma watched the whole mess and looked away, done with my uncle's family. She waited until they were gone, then walked me slowly toward the gate. He Xiangbei came up to us, bowed respectfully, and said, "Grandmother." The contrast with Li Zian couldn't have been sharper. Grandma's shoulders relaxed. She looked at me, and this time, she couldn't hold back her tears. "Go with him and build a good life," she managed to say. I squeezed her hand. "Take care of yourself these 2 days." She nodded, then gently placed my hand into He Xiangbei's broad palm. "Take good care of her," she told him. "If she ever does anything wrong, come tell me, and I'll set her straight." He Xiangbei hadn't planned what to say, but the words came out naturally. "Don't worry, grandmother. I'll be good to her." And somehow I believed him. Grandma watched me climb into the sedan chair through her tears, then made sure my dowry was carried out properly. I had 4 loads of dowry, 2 red wooden chests plus 2 more, which might not seem like much compared to wealthy families, but for a village girl, it was impressive. Most brides only get 2 loads at best. Li Zian, who was already walking ahead with Shuang, turned back and saw my 4 loads. Then he looked at Shuang's single thin roll of bedding. His face soured even more. I'm sure he was thinking that if Shuang hadn't stolen my engagement, all that dowry would have gone to the Li household. He yanked the silk ribbon hard and told Shuang to walk faster and stop embarrassing them. The sedan chair didn't go straight to the He house. Instead, it circled the entire village, a traditional way of announcing the marriage. By the time we arrived, half an hour had passed. The He family courtyard was lively and full of guests. He Xiangbei's mother, Mrs. Su, was greeting everyone with a warm smile. When the sedan arrived, she took her seat in the main hall for the ceremony. Xiao helped me inside, and everything happened in a blur. Bow to heaven and earth. Bow to the elders. Bow to each other. Escort to the bridal chamber. And just like that, I was married. In my past life, after the ceremony, I'd been left alone in the bridal room all day with nothing to eat or drink. This time was completely different. Xiao never left my side. "Sister-in-law, are you thirsty? Want some water?" "Sister-in-law, try these dried wild berries my mother made last year. They're sweet and sour." "Sister-in-law, mother said she'll save you a plate from the banquet." "What flavors do you like?" "Sister-in-law, my brother is a good man, just quiet. Be patient with him." Sister-in-law, she was an absolute chatterbox and I loved it. I told her to sit down and rest, but she just kept talking. She'd seen me kick Aunt Lu to the ground the other day and thought I was amazing. She said her brother was tough, and I was tough, so we were a perfect match. Apparently, the sedan chair had been her idea too. She told her mother that a woman only gets married once and deserves to ride in a sedan at least that one time. Mrs. Su agreed and had He Xiangbei arrange it. Xiao told me I'd been right to fight back against Aunt Lu. Standing there and letting someone hit you, that's what idiots do. I couldn't help laughing. I teased her about being old enough to find a husband at 16, and she turned red as a beet. "Stop it or I'm leaving." She was adorable. Then she mentioned something useful. He Xiangbei's grandmother and his aunt had both prepared welcome gifts for me. In wealthy families, it's customary for elders to give the new bride gifts during the morning tea ceremony. Village families usually can't afford such things. The fact that the He family did this told me several things. They were doing reasonably well financially, the extended family got along despite having split their household, and someone in the family understood proper etiquette. It might also have been partly because He Xiangbei regularly shared his hunting catches with them, so they were returning the goodwill. Either way, it was a promising sign about the family I'd just married into. From what Xiao told me, I pieced together that the He family was a decent one. Xiangbei's grandparents felt sorry for him and Xiao growing up without a father and living on their own so young, so they'd always been kind and supportive. That was the best-case scenario, genuine family warmth, not people just being nice because they wanted something. After everything I'd been through in my past life, I couldn't help being suspicious, but I was relieved. Xiao changed the subject to embroidery. She'd heard my skills were exceptional. I tried to be modest, but she wouldn't hear it. She told me she loved embroidery too, but her mother didn't know the craft, so she'd been teaching herself. She wanted to show me her work. She brought back some handkerchiefs with simple patterns, birds and flowers, the kind of basic designs beginners practice on. The color choices were limited, but I could tell she'd put real care into it. Her stitches were neat and evenly spaced, and her color transitions were clean. She had talent. She just needed better patterns and guidance. I asked if she had paper and a brush. Without even asking why, she jumped up and led me to a small desk in the corner of the room. There were books, some rough paper, brushes, and a well-worn inkstone. I was surprised. I hadn't known Xiangbei was literate. Xiao explained that their mother could read and write, and she taught both her children from a young age.
That was rare for a farm family.
Even my own grandmother only knew a handful of characters. In my past life, I didn't learn to read properly until I studied in the space library to fit in with the noble women in the capital. I lifted a corner of my red veil and started sketching embroidery patterns. Xiao was about to watch my hand closely when she caught a glimpse of my face and got completely distracted. "Sister-in-law, you're so beautiful." I smiled and kept drawing. The patterns I sketched were ones I'd learned from rare books in the space library, designs nobody in this country had ever seen. I drew 5 patterns quickly, marking the thread colors on each one, and handed them to Xiao. "Practice these first. If you have questions about the stitching techniques, come ask me." She held them like they were made of gold. In the city, embroidery shops charge steep prices for new patterns. Most people can't afford them. And here I'd just given her 5 beautiful, completely original designs for free. Her brother had married well, and she knew it. Xiao and I spent the entire day talking about embroidery. She brought me food twice, and the hours flew by. When night fell, her mother called her away, and the noise outside gradually died down. My heart started pounding. I was about to be alone with Xiangbei, my husband. The door opened. He walked in wearing his red wedding clothes, his hair tied up neatly, tall and straight-backed. He picked up the decorated weighing rod from the table and came over to lift my red veil. He stared. I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't expecting this. We'd met before, but today, with the makeup for my space and the ruby gold hairpin, I looked very different. His face flushed, and he seemed caught between surprise and nervousness. I was studying him too. The candlelight played across his strong features, making his jawline look even sharper. There was a faint blush on his cheeks, from shyness or wine. I couldn't tell. We just looked at each other in silence until he finally coughed. "It's getting late." I didn't know what else to say. I definitely couldn't think about what was supposed to happen next. Neither of us moved. Then his ears twitched. Years of hunting in the mountains had given him sharp senses. He walked to the door and yanked it open. 3 people tumbled in, 2 young men and a girl, falling over each other at his feet. I recognized all of them. The 2 men were his cousins from his second uncle's family, twins named Xiangqian and Xianho. The girl was, of course, Xiao. Xiangbei's face darkened. "Were you eavesdropping?" The twins were terrified of him. They stammered out an explanation. Their grandmother had sent them to make merry in the bridal chamber, a traditional custom where unmarried male relatives tease the newlyweds for good luck. But they were too scared of Xiangbei to actually go inside, so they decided to just peek through the door and report back to Grandma that they'd done their job. They'd barely gotten into position before he caught them. "Did you see anything?" he asked. They waved their hands frantically. "Nothing. We just gotten into position when you opened the door." He turned to Xiao. "And you?" She shrugged innocently. "I saw the cousins sneaking over and got curious. I didn't know they were supposed to be doing the wedding night tradition." He scolded her lightly for forgetting she was a young lady, and she stuck out her tongue and scurried off. The twins tried to slip away behind her, but Scumbag grabbed them both by their collars. Did I say you could leave? They froze.
We
promise we won't cause trouble. No. You're going to do it properly. People say it's good luck. Their faces went blank with panic.
But
How? You came here to do it and you don't even know how. I sat on the bed watching this whole scene, trying very hard not to laugh. My husband had just ordered 2 terrified young men to properly tease him on his wedding night. This family was something else. The twins were frozen with panic about how to properly tease us, so I stepped in. Husband, let it go. A good life comes from working hard together, not from customs. I didn't believe in any of that anyway. In my past life, Li Zian's brothers had come to tease us on our wedding night, and look how that marriage turned out. The twins shot me grateful looks. Then their jaws dropped when they saw my face. Scumbag noticed them staring at me and smacked them both on the back of the head. Get lost. They ran like something was chasing them. After that interruption, the awkwardness between us eased a little. I asked why his cousins were so scared of him.
no idea.
They've been afraid of me since we were kids. I've never even hit them. I stared at him. He had literally just smacked them both. He caught himself and added, just now didn't count. I didn't use any force, right? They only stumbled. Then he offered to bring me wash water. In my past life, no man had ever done that for me. Li Zian had come back drunk on our wedding night and demanded I wash his face for him. But Scumbag brought a basin of warm water, set it down in front of me, and said he'd go wash in the kitchen so I could have privacy. He'd come back to clear the basin afterward. I thanked him and I meant it. This was already so different from my first marriage. Meanwhile, things at the Li house were going exactly as badly as I'd expect. From what I later learned, Shuang had been completely ignored all day. No food, no water, no visitors. When Li Zian stumbled into the bridal room that night, drunk, he collapsed on the bed and pretended to sleep. Shuang tried everything. She softened her voice, complained about being hungry, shed a few tears. Li Zian finally snapped. Stop crying. How unlucky. She was stunned. In her memory of the past life, he'd always been gentle and refined, especially around me. She didn't understand why he was treating her so differently. She told herself it was just because I had a prettier face, and that once she became a marquis's wife and could dress herself up, he'd come around. She reminded him to at least lift her veil. He grabbed the rod and flipped it off, then recoiled in horror. Her face was a nightmare. The scratch marks from her mother's nails had scabbed over, pulling her skin tight. Her crying had smeared her makeup into streaks of red and black. In the dim lamplight, she looked exactly like a ghost from a horror story.
Li Zian stumbled backward.
How unlucky. I'm a scholar, and I've married a woman who could frighten someone to death. Shuang rushed to explain that the scratches were healing and would be gone soon. But he wasn't just talking about the scratches. He told her to look in a mirror and see for herself. She dug a small bronze mirror out of her meager bundle of belongings in the corner. I can only imagine what she saw. Meanwhile, I later found out what happened at the Li house that night. Shuang had looked in her mirror and scared herself. Smeared makeup, scabbed scratches. She really did look like a ghost. She ran out to the courtyard well, hauled up a bucket of water, and scrubbed her face clean before going back inside. By then, Li Zian had sobered up a bit. He remembered his mother's instructions from the night before. Since he was physically incapable with women, one of his younger brothers would secretly take his place on the wedding night. That way there would be an heir, still Li family blood. Li Zian found it distasteful, but he agreed it was the only way to keep a secret. So when Shuang returned with a clean face, he suddenly turned civil. He poured 2 cups of wine and offered her one for the traditional toast. Shuang was thrilled. She told herself this was proof she'd made the right choice. She remembered how cold Scumbag had been on their wedding night in her past life, scolding her just for ordering Xiao to bring wash water. She decided Li Zian was far superior. She drank the wine, gazed at him adoringly, and he excused himself to go wash up. She stripped down and climbed into bed, trying to stay awake. She lasted less than 15 minutes before falling into a deep sleep. Back at our house, Scumbag and I had been talking for over an hour, without realizing it. We were both getting drowsy, but neither of us wanted to be the one to suggest going to bed, because we both knew what that meant. After my 5th or 6th yawn, he finally said, "It's late. We should rest." My heart started racing. He turned around to give me privacy. I understood he was letting me change. I peeled off the wedding dress, took down my hair, climbed onto the bed, and wrapped the red quilt around myself as tightly as possible, leaving only the top of my head visible. "You can turn around now." He turned and saw what must have looked like a red silkworm cocoon lying stiffly on the bed. That was me. He stood there for a while, and I could sense his hesitation. He wasn't sure if I was wrapping myself up because I didn't want him to touch me. After all, I'd originally been engaged to Lee Zian, and this whole marriage had only happened because of the swap. He didn't know if I was rejecting him. The truth was, he'd never felt attracted to any girl in his 19 years. He'd figured he was just different, someone who didn't understand romance. So when his mother arranged a marriage, he went along with it. But after meeting me, something had shifted.
He didn't dislike me.
He even admired certain things about me. He thought maybe this swap wasn't such a bad thing after all. But now, facing the reality of being intimate with someone he barely knew, he was just as lost as I was. I lay inside my cocoon of blankets, listening hard for any sound. Nothing. Complete silence. I lay there counting the minutes. Half an hour passed in total silence. Finally, curiosity won out, and I pulled the blanket down a little. There was Scumbag, standing right by the bed, looking completely lost. Our eyes met. We both looked away instantly. My face was burning. "Aren't you going to sleep?" I managed. He hesitated, then said something I didn't expect. "If you're not comfortable, we can wait. We don't have to do anything tonight.
We can take our time."
"Until you're ready." It was exactly what I needed to hear.
"Good.
"Let's get to know each other first." The tension drained out of my body. I unwrapped myself from my cocoon. He took off his outer clothes and lay down on the far edge of the bed. We fell asleep on opposite sides with enough space between us to fit a pig. What I didn't know was what happened during the night. Apparently, I migrated in my sleep. I ended up pressed against him, one arm across his chest, both legs wrapped around his thigh. He'd woken up the moment I touched him. Years of hunting had made him a light sleeper, but he didn't dare move. He stayed frozen in that exact position until morning. When I woke up at the rooster's crow, I discovered the situation. My left leg was pinned under his thigh, completely numb. My right leg was draped over him. I wanted to die of embarrassment. As carefully as I could, I untangled myself. He seemed to still be sleeping. I threw on clothes and fled the room. What I didn't know was that he'd been awake the whole time, watching me through barely open eyes, his heart racing. Outside, I ran into my mother-in-law, Mrs.
Su.
This was our first real meeting. Decades of practice in noble circles during my past life kicked in automatically. I gave her a perfectly executed formal bow. "Good morning, Mother." She looked startled. That kind of flawless etiquette usually takes wealthy ladies years to learn. She couldn't figure out how a village girl knew it, but eventually decided Grandma must have taught me, since Grandma had managed an embroidery shop in the city years ago. She smiled warmly. "It's early. Why didn't you sleep longer?" I told her I was used to waking at the rooster's crow. When I saw she was headed to the kitchen, I offered to help, but she insisted on cooking herself. It was my first morning, after all. She suggested I water the vegetable garden out back instead. The garden was small but tidy, with little green sprouts just coming up. I found the well nearby, rolled up my sleeves, and was about to lower the bucket when Scumbag's voice came from behind me. "Let me. Drawing water from a well takes real strength." I could have done it. The spirit water had made me stronger than most women, but I'd learned an important lesson from books in my past life. When a man offers to help, accept graciously. If you keep refusing, he'll eventually stop offering. Then when you truly need help someday, he won't think to give it. With Lee Zian, none of that wisdom had mattered. He wasn't a normal person. But Scumbag was different. Even after just one night, I could tell he was decent and sincere. With him, these principles would actually work. Scumbag hauled several buckets of water from the well, without another word. He was always quiet, but I could tell he was extra tongue-tied around me, probably still thinking about last night. While he wasn't looking, I slipped a few drops of spirit spring water into the bucket before watering the vegetable seedlings. That water would make them grow faster and stronger. When I finished, I headed toward the kitchen and heard a familiar voice from next door, Mrs. Zhao, Li Xian's mother, screaming at Shuang to get up and make breakfast. It was the exact same script from my past life, word for word. Back then, she'd done the same thing to me on my first morning. Shuang finally dragged herself out of bed. She was sore and dizzy. The moment she opened the door, Mrs. Zhao shoved a shovel at her and told her to clean the pig pen. Shuang was horrified. Her mother had never made her do hard labor. But she remembered, in the past life, I'd been given this same task on my first morning at the Li house. I'd done it without complaint, and Mrs. Zhao had still refused to let me eat breakfast. Shuang decided she'd better comply, or she'd go hungry again. She picked up the shovel and walked to the pig pen, already gagging from the smell. Then she stepped on something slippery, lost her balance, and fell backward, right into a pile of pig manure. Her screaming woke the whole household. Mrs. Zhao came to look and found her covered in filth, the pig running wild. She cursed Shuang for being useless. When Shuang tried to respond, something foul got in her mouth and she started retching. Li Xian's brother Li Zihwan came out half-dressed, annoyed by the noise. But he decided to help Shuang for his own reasons. He told his mother to go easy on the new bride and pointed out the neighbors could hear everything. Mrs. Zhao grudgingly backed off and sent Shuang inside to clean up. We heard all of it through the wall. The He family just shook their heads. Breakfast at our house was wonderful by comparison. Mrs. Su had made 4 small dishes, plus rice porridge and flatbread, far better than most village families, who'd be lucky to have thin porridge and pickles. Before we ate, she handed me a red envelope as a welcome gift. I could feel about 1 tael of silver inside. I should have had gifts ready for my in-laws too. I'd actually made shoes for my original groom's family, the Li family, but those obviously couldn't go to the He family. Then I remembered the embroidered pillow covers I'd recovered from Shuang's room. They were my own handiwork and quite nice. I excused myself, went to the bedroom, pulled them from my space, and presented one to Mrs. Su and one to Xiao. Xiao was thrilled with her pillow cover, running her fingers over the embroidery. Mrs. Su liked hers too, and complimented my needlework. Then I noticed He Xiangbei sitting there looking at his mother and sister's gifts with what I can only describe as quiet envy. I cleared my throat awkwardly. The engagement swap happened so suddenly. I'll make up your gift later, husband. He kept a straight face but seemed satisfied. Fine. At breakfast, he picked up food with his chopsticks and put it in my bowl before serving himself. Xiao immediately called him out. Look, mother. Brother is being sweet to his wife. He's never done that for us. We both turned red. Mrs. Su scolded Xiao for teasing, so He Xiangbei silently dropped a piece of meat into his sister's bowl. That shut her up. After breakfast, He Xiangbei and I went to visit his grandparents at the old He family home. On our way out, we ran into Shuang carrying a huge basin of dirty laundry from the Li house, looking miserable. She couldn't resist taking a shot at me. What are you staring at? Unlike some people, I actually do work at my husband's house instead of dragging my man around showing off. I smiled. Sounds like Li Xian won't go anywhere with you, and you're jealous. She tried a different angle, turning to He Xiangbei. Don't spoil your wife. You'll regret it. He didn't even look at her. I want to spoil her. Mind your own business. At the He family home, everyone was gathered. Clearly the grandfather had arranged it. I greeted each person properly. The grandparents gave me a red envelope with 1 tael of silver, and each uncle's family gave 500 copper coins. For village families, that was generous. I made a mental note to return the kindness when I could. Back home, Mrs. Su made a suggestion I didn't expect. She told He Xiangbei to take me to the government office to register our marriage officially. Most village couples skip this because it costs a whole tael of silver. In my past life, Li Xian only bothered with it after he needed official documents for the capital. She also asked us to visit his older sister, Hiaya, who was in town recovering from childbirth and couldn't come to the wedding. Oddly, her husband and his family hadn't come either, something worth wondering about. Xiangbei grabbed a cloth bundle from our room, shaped like it held books, and we set off on foot since the morning ox cart had already left. It was market day in town, and the streets were packed. Xiangbei grabbed my hand to keep us from getting separated. His face showed nothing, but I could feel his pulse racing through his palm. At the government office, we handed over our household papers and one tael of silver. 15 minutes later, we had an official marriage certificate stamped with the government seal. Xiangbei tucked it inside his jacket carefully. Then he led me to a shop called Sunrise Bookstore. The bustling market noise faded as we stepped inside. The place was quiet and nearly empty. The town we lived near, Sunset Town, wasn't wealthy and few people could read. Books and paper were expensive luxuries, so the bookstore didn't get much business. But I recognized the name, Sunrise Bookstore. It belonged to the Fu family, the biggest merchant family with imperial connections in the entire country. In my past life, the bookstore had been my first business partner. I'd eventually become close with the eldest son, Fu Hengxin, and our joint ventures had funded most of Li Zian's household expenses after he became an official. The shopkeeper, Mr. Sun, perked up when he saw Xiangbei. They were clearly on familiar terms. Then he spotted me behind my husband and started staring. Xiangbei stepped forward to block his view. "This is my wife, Mr. Sun congratulated him on his good fortune, then got down to business. Xiangbei placed a cloth bundle on the counter, 12 hand-copied books, 200 copper coins each, totaling 2 taels and 400 coins. So this was how Xiangbei earned extra money between hunting trips. He copied books for the store. Mr. Sun offered him 10 more books to copy, and I noticed they were all popular storybooks. That's when a light went on in my head. In my past life, storybooks had been how Li Zian and I made our first real money. The space library was full of amazing stories that didn't exist in this world. I'd had Li Zian copy one called Legend of the White Snake and sell it as an original work. We brought it to this very bookstore, though the manager back then was a different man, a Mr. Li, who'd rudely dismissed us until the Fu family's eldest son happened to come downstairs, read the opening pages, and was instantly hooked. That partnership made us wealthy. The story became so wildly popular they had to carve printing blocks for mass production, something only done for the biggest bestsellers. I picked up one of the storybooks on the counter. The Iron Palm. Just as I thought, a standard martial arts tale, the kind where you change the title but the plot stays the same. I put it down and asked casually, "Mr. Sun, does this store buy original storybooks?" He looked surprised. "Can you write stories, Mrs. He?" I glanced at Xiangbei, who looked completely lost. "My husband has some ideas," I said smoothly. Mr. Sun's face cleared. Of course, a woman wouldn't write stories. If Xiangbei can write something original, it'll definitely pay better than copying. "Bring it to me when it's ready and I'll take a look." Xiangbei had no idea what I was up to, but he didn't contradict me in front of the shopkeeper. He followed me out of the store in silence. Once we were outside, he turned and looked at me with questioning eyes. Xiangbei wanted to know what I was thinking with the storybook idea. I told him I had some stories in my head and wanted him to write them down. Unlike my past life, where Li Zian could just copy directly from the space library, this time I'd have to dictate from memory. Xiangbei agreed to try. At the market, we stopped at the butcher's. Xiangbei went for pork belly, but I was eyeing the ribs. He thought I wanted them because they were cheaper, 5 coins a pound compared to 20 for regular pork, assuming I'd gone hungry at my old home. He didn't know that I'd learned incredible rib recipes from the space library. Braised ribs, sweet and sour ribs, both better than any pork belly dish. "I like ribs," I told him simply. He gave in and bought a whole rack for me, plus 2 pieces of pork belly, one for his sister, one for home. I picked up some star anise and cinnamon at the medicine shop, and we grabbed sugar and 50 eggs too. We walked into a narrow alley to his older sister, Hiya's house. The front gate was open, and the sight inside made my blood boil. Yaya was carrying her baby on her back while hauling a heavy bucket of water. Behind her, A mean-looking middle-aged woman, her mother-in-law, Mrs. Fong, was marching toward her with a broom, cursing her for being too slow. Scumbag dropped everything and lunged forward, but I stopped him. Let me handle this. Hitting women is my job. I meant it. If a man struck a woman, even with good reason, she could run to the authorities and cause real trouble. But a woman fighting another woman? That happens every day in every village. Nobody takes it to court. I moved fast. I grabbed the broom mid-swing, yanked it away, and gave Mrs. Fong several solid whacks with it. She screamed and spun around, confused.
Who are you?
How dare you come to my house and hit me? I planted myself in front of Yaya, hands on my hips, and stared the woman down. Experience taught me that against bullies, you must never show weakness. I helped Yaya sit down on a stool while Scumbag came over. He went straight to his sister. Why didn't you send word that you were suffering here? She burst into tears the moment she saw him. Mrs. Foam quickly switched to a fake smile, pretending everything was fine, shooting threatening glances at Yaya behind our backs. I watched Yaya flinch under that look. She was terrified of this woman. I wiped her tears with a clean handkerchief. I'm your brother's new wife. With us here, you don't have to be afraid. Tell us everything. The baby started crying. Yaya held her tight, but didn't move to feed her. That's when the full picture became clear. She told us the truth. Since giving birth, she hadn't eaten a single full meal. She had no breast milk. Her baby cried constantly from hunger. 5 days after delivery, her mother-in-law had forced her back to work, cooking, laundry, everything. And whenever Mrs. Fong was in a bad mood, she'd beat her. Scumbag's face was dark with fury. I kept my hand on Yaya's shoulder. One way or another, we weren't leaving her here. Scumbag's knuckles were white from clenching his fists. Before he could do something he'd regret, I stepped in and slapped Mrs. Fong across the face several times. A girl around 15 or 16 came out of a side room, sharp-eyed and mean-looking, practically a younger copy of Mrs.
Fong.
This was Yaya's sister-in-law, Lu Chui. She'd been sitting by the window eating sunflower seeds, watching her mother about to beat Yaya, like it was entertainment. Don't touch my mother, you hussy, she screamed. I knew her type instantly. She'd watched Yaya get abused, without lifting a finger. I slapped her too. I'm a hussy, and what are you going to do about it? I later learned Lu Chui had been obsessed with Xiangbei for years. She tried to get Yaya to set them up, but he'd rejected the idea outright. Lu Chui blamed Yaya for not trying hard enough, which was another reason the family treated her so badly. Now, seeing how beautiful I was, Lu Chui was burning with jealousy. Mother and daughter came at me from both sides. I was ready to fight, but suddenly I felt myself lifted off the ground. Xiangbei had grabbed me around the waist, spun me out of the way, and set me down behind him. Mrs. Fong and Lu Chui, charging too fast to stop, crashed right into each other. Idiot, he muttered at me, sounding annoyed. When you see them attacking, move out of the way, but I could tell he understood why I'd put myself in the middle. I was protecting him from the consequences of hitting women. He accepted my gesture and kept his composure. He turned to Yaya. Pack your things. You're coming home with us. With those two constantly interfering, we couldn't even have a proper conversation with Yaya. It was better to just take her away. Yaya seemed frozen, so I helped her up. She went to her room, wrapped up the baby more snugly, looked around, and found nothing else worth taking. She had nothing. Mrs. Fong didn't dare block Xiangbei, so she dropped to the ground and put on a performance for the neighbors, wailing about how well she'd treated her daughter-in-law and how ungrateful the family was. Neighbors gathered at the door, looked at poor, starving Yaya, shook their heads in sympathy, and walked away. Nobody believed a word Mrs. Fong said. I turned back and glared at her. Don't think this is over. Lu Chui, meanwhile, was eyeing the meat and eggs Xiangbei was carrying. Mother, this is your fault. If you hadn't picked today to bully her, all that food would be ours. Mrs. Fong snapped at her. All you think about is eating. Once we were outside, I took the baby from Yaya's arms. The child weighed almost nothing, maybe 3 or 4 pounds at most, and she was already half a month old. Her face was wrinkled from crying, like a tiny kitten. Her cries were getting weaker. She was running out of strength. While Yeye and Xiangbei walked ahead, I secretly dropped a tiny bit of spirit spring water into the baby's mouth. She smacked her lips, instantly perked up, and stopped crying. Xiangbei found Yeye a stone bench to rest on, then went to hire an ox cart to take us all home. She was too weak to walk the whole way back to the village. Xiangbei brought a cart back quickly, and we headed home. As we passed the old Su house, I craned my neck to catch a glimpse of Grandma, but her door was closed and the yard was empty. Xiangbei noticed. "Tomorrow is your homecoming day. We'll go early." I appreciated that. "Thank you. We're family now. Stop thanking me for everything." At our gate, we ran into Shuang hauling 2 baskets of pig feed from the hills. She tried to pretend she didn't see us, but her eyes drifted over to the cart anyway. She spotted Yeye, and I could practically read her thoughts. In her past life, Yeye had died from her mother-in-law's abuse before Xiangbei's hunting accident. After that accident, Xiangbei had gone to confront the Lu family, broken the husband's leg, and gotten 30 lashes and a 10-tael fine from the court. The injuries from those lashes were what caused him to fall and break both legs in the mountains later. In Shuang's mind, that same disaster was about to land on me. The thought clearly made her feel better about her own miserable situation. She didn't know things would be different this time. Inside, Mrs. Su saw her daughter's condition and knew something was very wrong. She took the baby from my arms and sent Xiao to help Yeye inside. The moment Yeye saw her mother, she collapsed into her arms sobbing. "If Xiangbei and his wife hadn't come today, you might never have seen me again." I explained everything that had happened at the Lu house. Xiao turned red with fury. "Why didn't you tell brother? He would have helped you." Yeye could barely speak through her tears. She tried to explain but couldn't get the words out. Then footsteps came pounding into our yard. Xiao opened the door to find the entire He clan, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, all pouring in. Word had spread through the village that Xiangbei had brought his sister home, and the family knew something must be wrong. "Grandmother," he took Yeye's hand. "Tell us everything." With all her family around her, Yeye finally managed to speak. She told them how her mother-in-law had treated her like a servant from day one. Her husband, Lu Fei, worked away from home and only came back 2 days a month. Mrs. Feng behaved herself during those visits, so he supposedly didn't know. "Grandmother," he was furious. "Then why didn't you tell him yourself?" Yeye hung her head. "He works so hard. I didn't want to burden him. I kept my mouth shut, but I was thinking what everyone was thinking. Her husband wasn't blind. He must have seen how thin and weak she'd become. He was playing dumb. Fortunately, Xiao said it for me. He's not blind, sister. He's pretending not to notice." The aunts agreed immediately. Yeye tried to explain further that the abuse only got physical after she failed to produce a son, but after Xiao's words, her defense felt hollow. She just buried her face in her mother's arms and cried. The room went quiet for a moment. Then grandfather he stood up and said 3 words, "Grab your tools." Uncle One stood up too. "Let's go. Does the Lu family think we have no one to stand up for our own?" Uncle Two followed. "Our girl was bullied. We're not letting this slide." The whole He clan was going to war. The He cousins were already heading home to grab hoes and shovels, ready to storm the Lu house. I'd lived 2 lifetimes and never seen a family this united. But I knew this was a terrible idea. The Lu family was clearly in the wrong. If we took this to court, Mrs. Feng would have to answer for what she'd done to Yeye. But if a mob of He-men showed up at her door with farming tools, even if nobody got hurt, she could run to the authorities and turn the whole thing around on us. We'd lose the moral high ground. I pulled Xiangbei aside and whispered my thoughts. He immediately went out and stopped everyone. His oldest cousin was frustrated. "You're the best fighter among us, and she's your own sister. If you won't go, why stop the rest of us?" Xiangbei repeated what I'd told him. Going after 2 women at home would only backfire in court. He promised he had a plan and asked them to wait. The grandfather agreed, and the clan reluctantly stood down. What I didn't know was that Shuang had been listening through the wall the entire time. She was troubled. In her past life, Xiangbei had gone to the Lu house alone, beaten the husband and gotten 30 lashes and a heavy fine from the court. Those injuries from the lashes were exactly what later caused him to fall and break both legs while hunting. If he didn't go pick that fight, he'd never become crippled, and I'd never suffer the way she had. After the He clan left, she couldn't contain herself. She marched over to our gate. Xiao blocked her. "What do you want?" Shuang launched into her provocation, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He Scumbag, I can't believe you're this spineless. Your own sister gets abused and you don't even have the courage to get revenge? Are you even a man?" She was trying to goad him into doing something reckless, to push events back onto the track from her past life. Xiao shut her down beautifully. "Mind your own business, outsider. My sister has my brother, our grandparents, and a whole family of uncles and cousins backing her up. What do you have? You'd better worry about not getting bullied by your own mother-in-law. When that day comes, you won't even know how to cry properly." I'd been about to say something myself, but my little sister-in-law was handling things so well I just stood there and enjoyed the show. Then Li Zian appeared behind Shuang. He was livid. "Get back inside." Now, he'd had enough of her meddling in other families' business, embarrassing him publicly. And there was something else eating at him. The night before, he'd heard everything through the thin walls. The sounds coming from the room where Shuang had been with his brother, Li Zihuan. She'd clearly enjoyed herself thoroughly with the substitute, and now here she was, running over to concern herself with He Xiangbei. In his eyes, she was shameless beyond belief. Shuang tried to push back. "You're scolding me in front of strangers? Don't test me," he hissed through clenched teeth. "Or I'll divorce you." That word, divorce, hit her like ice water. Everything she'd schemed for depended on staying married to him. She swallowed her anger and followed him back. The moment she stepped into the Li family courtyard, Mrs. Zhao was waiting. She grabbed Shuang by the hair. "You little wretch! Married into my family, and already eyeing other men? I'll teach you a lesson," Shuang screamed. "You can't hit me. I'll tell my father." But there was nobody coming to save her. Xiao slammed our gate shut with the satisfaction of a winner and turned to He Xiangbei. "You really are the lucky one, brother." We all knew exactly what she meant. It was time to cook dinner. Mrs. Su started to get up, but I offered to take over. Both He Xiangbei and Xiao volunteered to help me with the fire at the same time. Mrs. Su settled it. Xiao would stay and help Yaya with the baby, and He Xiangbei would come with me. She shot Xiao a look. The girl was wonderful, but she needed to learn when to give newlyweds some space. In the kitchen, I made a rib soup for Yaya, sneaking a drop of spirit spring water in while He Xiangbei wasn't looking. Then I made braised pork belly and sweet and sour ribs, with the ingredients we bought. While I cooked and he fed the fire, I asked if he planned to go to the Liu house tonight.
He said yes.
I asked to come along.
"It's dangerous," he said.
"I know some fighting." "I won't hold you back," he looked surprised. I told him I'd learned as a child through some lucky circumstances. I didn't want to build a web of lies. One lie leads to 100 more, and I was too tired for that. Thankfully, he didn't press for details.
"Fine.
We'll go together." The smell of braised pork filled the air and drifted beyond our walls. Through the wall, Shuang could smell everything. She'd been working all day on half a bowl of thin rice water and half a flatbread. She was starving, bruised from Mrs. Zhao's beating, and too afraid to ask for food. When she went to Li Zian begging for something to eat, he looked at her with disgust and told her to get lost. All he could think about was what he'd overheard the night before, his brother and Shuang together. It sickened him. At our table, the food was a hit. Mrs. Su told Xiao to bring a bowl of braised pork to my grandmother. I was so grateful, I could have cried. I'd been worrying about Grandma all day. Xiao ran off with the food and came back reporting that Grandma was fine and planned to move to her new house after my homecoming visit tomorrow. She'd refused the meat, but Xiao had left it there and sprinted away before Grandma could give it back. Yaya drank 2 bowls of rib soup and immediately felt better, the spirit spring water working its quiet magic. He Xiangbei gave me first pick of every dish, just like at breakfast. Even he admitted the ribs were delicious. I didn't think bones with barely any meat could taste this good, Mrs.
"So's my."
We're lucky to have her. Everything was eaten clean. Afterward, Mrs. Su arranged for Yeya and the baby to sleep in her room, so she could help during the night. Their house only had 3 rooms, so it was the practical choice. He Scumbag and I washed up and went back to our room. We had somewhere to be tonight. It was too early to head to the Lu house, so he Scumbag told me to rest first while he sat at his desk to copy books. I learned that the 12 books he delivered to the bookstore weren't all his work. His mother helped with the copying too, earning extra income during her spare time. He Scumbag treated it as a side job alongside hunting. I decided to unpack my dowry instead of sleeping. While sorting through the red wooden chests, I found a bolt of deep blue-green fabric perfect for He Xiangbei's skin tone. I'd promised him a wedding gift, so I asked him to stand up so I could measure him for new clothes. He walked over. I unfolded the fabric, and then something fell out and hit the floor. We both looked down at the same time. It was that little yellowed booklet Grandma had given me the night before the wedding.
The
Intimacy Guide. I lunged for it, but he was faster. He picked it up, read the title on the cover, and his face turned bright red. Then he flung it at me like it was on fire. Here, take it back. I shoved it to the bottom of the chest, wishing the ground would swallow me whole. He tried to rescue the moment. Weren't you going to measure me for clothes? Yes. Right now. I held up the fabric against him in a complete daze. When I finished, my mind was totally blank. Did you get the measurements? He asked.
Yes.
All done. I had no idea what I'd just measured. He went back to his desk but couldn't concentrate. I heard a ripping sound. He'd ruined a page and crumpled it into a ball. Neither of us could function anymore. I lay down on the bed, pretending to sleep. He went outside, paced the courtyard twice, came back, and lay down on the edge of the bed. At midnight, he got up right on time. I rose with him. We both put on dark clothing without needing to discuss it. He took my hand as we walked through the sleeping village. Neither of us spoke. At the Lu house, the walls were low enough to climb. He crouched down and let me step on his shoulders to get over, then vaulted up behind me. He knew the layout well from previous visits. He planned to put a sack over Mrs. Feng's head and beat her. But I stopped him. I have a better way. I pulled out incense sticks laced with a sleeping drug, something from my space. I lit one, poked a small hole in the window, and slipped it inside Mrs. Feng's room. Then I did the same to Lu Chui's room. Within 15 minutes, they were both out cold. We split up. He Xiangbei went into Mrs. Feng's room, dragged her off the bed, and gave her a thorough beating. I went into Lu Chui's room, picked up a dirty shoe from the floor, and slapped her across the face with it until she was bleeding from the mouth and missing 2 teeth. We cleaned up every trace of the incense ash, walked out silently, and disappeared into the night. On the way back, he asked where I'd gotten the sleeping incense. It was expensive and hard to find. I told him a traveling doctor had given it to me for self-defense. It wasn't entirely convincing, but he accepted it with a quiet and didn't push further. We got home before dawn, cleaned up, and collapsed into bed. I slept so deeply that for the first time since my rebirth, I didn't hear the roosters crow. When I woke up, He Xiangbei was already gone. I stretched and remembered the crumpled paper I'd picked up from his desk the night before. I smoothed it out. The first few lines were neatly written book copying text. But the last 3 characters he'd written before ruining the page? Spring Palace Pictures, the title of that embarrassing booklet. The man had been so distracted by that little incident that he'd written it while copying an entirely different book. I mentally called him a few choice words, crumpled the paper back up, and put it exactly where it had been. I saw nothing. I know nothing. I came out to find Mrs. Su had already made breakfast. I apologized for oversleeping. She smiled knowingly. She assumed newlyweds had their reasons for being tired in the morning. I let the misunderstanding stand. I checked on Yeya. Overnight, her milk had come in abundantly. The spirit spring water was working. Baby Nuno had eaten her fill and was lying on the bed playing contentedly instead of crying. Yeya herself looked so much better, nothing like the frail ghost we'd brought home yesterday. Mrs. Su mentioned Xiangbei had gone into the mountains at dawn to check his traps, hoping to find something good to bring to Grandma for my homecoming visit. He returned just as we started eating, carrying a wild chicken and a rabbit. After breakfast, we set off with 2 boxes of pastries Mrs. Su had prepared plus the 2 animals. Villagers along the way complimented Xiangbei on his generous gifts. Hearing people praise him gave me an unexpected flutter of happiness. Maybe heaven really was giving me a second chance to make up for my miserable first life. Grandma was waiting outside her gate. She beamed when she saw us walking together. I ran to her and took her arm. "How have you been these 2 days?" She assured me everything was fine. Xiangbei greeted her respectfully, and she ushered us inside with a warm smile. From the west room, my uncle's family watched with envious eyes. Little Qingyang spotted the meat and begged his parents to go claim some. Aunt Lu was ready to march out, but for once my uncle had enough sense to stop her. "Those aren't for us. Don't go out there and embarrass yourself." He warned her that if she caused another scene, he'd divorce her. Qingyang whined. "If my sister hadn't pulled that stunt at the river, all that meat would be ours." My uncle glared at Aunt Lu. "Idiot." She wanted to explain the real reason for the swap, but remembered Shuang's warning to keep the secret. She just hoped the Li family's homecoming gifts wouldn't be too embarrassing by comparison. Over at the Li house, Shuang was trying to wake Li Zian for their own homecoming visit. He wouldn't budge. He'd been up half the night again. His mother and brother had pressured him into letting Li Zihuan visit Shuang's bed a second time. Li Zihuan had gone at it until the small hours, and Li Zian had to stay awake in the next room waiting for it to end. He was exhausted and furious, and he didn't care one bit about visiting Shuang's parents. Shuang thought Li Zian had simply been vigorous last night and decided to let him sleep. Grandma planned to move to her new house tomorrow. She'd specifically waited for my homecoming before leaving. She wanted me to return to the house where I grew up, the place I'd walked out of as a bride. Changing a location wouldn't feel right. Today, she just wanted to cook us a good meal. Xiangbei offered to help Grandma move tomorrow morning. She thanked him, and he said it was only right. Grandma went to the kitchen to cook. She bought pork the day before and planned to make radish meatballs, plus dishes from the wild chicken and rabbit Xiangbei brought. I knew her cooking was wonderful. I'd been missing her food, so I let her take charge. Xiangbei took over fire duty, leaving me with nothing to do. I decided to help Grandma organize her belongings for tomorrow's move. At the bottom of her wardrobe, I found something I'd never seen before, a small wrapped bundle. Inside was a set of pink silk baby clothes made from fabric far finer than anything sold in our town, or even the county. There was also a gold and jade longevity lock with "Long Life and Prosperity" engraved on the back. The craftsmanship was clearly not from an ordinary family. This gave me a lot to think about. Why did Grandma have something like this? But I'd lived long enough to know. If she hadn't told me about it, she had her reasons. I wrapped everything back up exactly as I'd found it and put it back. I even abandoned my plan to organize her things, so she'd never know I'd seen it. Over in the West Room, my uncle's family was suffering. Little Qingyang was drooling over the cooking smells and whining about wanting meat. Aunt Lu was worried because Shuang still hadn't come for her homecoming visit. It was nearly noon. My uncle was furious about the whole situation, thinking about how if Shuang had just married Xiangbei as planned, they'd never lack for meat. Qingyang couldn't take it anymore. He marched into the kitchen demanding food from Grandma. She refused. "We've split households. Go ask your parents to feed you." He hadn't come looking for her once in the past 2 days when she needed to eat. Now he wanted her food? The boy exploded. "Am I not your grandson? You only care about that worthless Su Yunwan." Before Grandma could respond, Xiangbei stood up, grabbed Qingyang by the collar like a baby chick, and deposited him outside the kitchen door. The boy burst into tears, not from pain, but pure terror. Aunt Lu rushed over, and my uncle followed. She immediately blamed Grandma for being stingy with a child. My uncle accused her of playing favorites. Grandma came out, her face like thunder. "I gave you the house and all the farmland when we split. And you're calling me unfair?" They couldn't argue with that. The whole village knew she'd left with nothing. Aunt Lu switched tactics. Yunwan's homecoming gifts were brought to our house, so we should get a share. That was too much. I stepped in. What dowry did you give me when I left? And now you want my gifts? I ate your food and drank your water growing up. Everything I ate came from Grandma's earnings. Once I was old enough, Grandma and I supported ourselves with embroidery. If anything, your family freeloaded off us. How can you say something so shameless without worrying people will laugh at you? Aunt Lu raised her hand to hit me again. Scumbag stepped in front of me like a wall, arms crossed. Try it. She didn't dare. Instead, she dropped to the ground and launched into her usual performance, screaming, rolling, calling on heaven to witness the injustice. A crowd gathered at the gate to watch. That's when Shuang and Li Zian arrived for their own homecoming visit. Shuang spotted the crowd and started running, then tripped on a rock and went sprawling face first into the dirt. The 5 eggs she was carrying, her entire homecoming gift, shattered on the ground. Li Zian was so furious he walked up and kicked her. You idiot! Don't you watch where you're going? She cried and begged him to stop, but he told her to get up before people laughed at her. When they reached our gate, and he saw Aunt Lu rolling on the ground making a spectacle, that was the final straw. A man who fancied himself a refined scholar couldn't bear being associated with this. He turned and walked away without a word. Shuang chased after him, grabbing his sleeve. He shook her off. Don't touch me. He said he felt sick and left. She stood there watching him go, grinding her teeth. In her past life, the roles had been reversed. Li Zian had dutifully accompanied me to my homecoming and brought a big piece of pork. She didn't know I'd bought that pork myself with my own dowry money just to make Grandma think I was doing well. And in her past life with Scumbag, her homecoming gift had also been only 5 eggs. Scumbag had eaten the packet of pastries on the walkover. Now history was repeating itself in the cruelest way. She couldn't even manage to keep 5 eggs intact. She dragged herself into the yard looking miserable. Qingyang ran up excitedly asking where her husband was and where the gifts were. She ignored him. She pulled Aunt Lu off the ground. Mother, what are you doing? Everyone is watching. Aunt Lu turned her fury on Shuang. Look at that worthless girl. She came back early with her husband and all those gifts. And you? Nearly noon, empty-handed, no husband in sight. My uncle finally barked at everyone to get back inside. Aunt Lu looked around and saw me, Grandma, and Shuangbai all standing with our arms crossed, watching her, the exact same pose as the gawking villagers. She realized her whole crying scene had landed like a fist punching cotton. Zero impact. Shuang dragged her mother and brother back to the west room. She could tell from our faces that her mother had embarrassed herself again. No wonder Li Zian had fled. Behind closed doors, Aunt Lu was starting to seriously doubt Shuang's dream about Li Zian's glorious future. Nothing was going the way her daughter had promised. Meanwhile, Grandma had outdone herself in the kitchen. She'd even cooked white rice, a real luxury. White rice cost 20 coins a pound in good years and double that during bad harvests. Most farming families couldn't afford it even at New Year. But for her granddaughter's homecoming, nothing was too much. Xiangbei noticed the white rice and understood. Grandma was showing respect for him as her grandson-in-law. During the meal, we could hear Qingyang crying and demanding meat through the wall. I glanced at Grandma, wondering if she wanted to send him some food. He was still her grandson, after all. But she sat there eating with a deliberately unbothered expression, so I let it go. Tomorrow she'd move out and be free of this place. Back home, Xiao pulled me aside for gossip. Shuang had been screamed at by Mrs. Zhao for dropping those 5 eggs. In my past life, Mrs. Zhao had tormented me too, calling me a hen that couldn't lay eggs when I failed to produce children, not knowing it was because Li Zihuan never succeeded in his secret visits after I caught on to their scheme that first night. Shuang was now living through her own version of that nightmare. I didn't feel sorry for her. In my first life, I'd taken her in when she had nowhere to go, and she'd repaid me by drugging my food with an aphrodisiac, trying to ruin me. She'd even had a hand in my eventual death. Li Zian had confessed everything just before I died. Without that confession, I'd never have known. I checked on Yeye and the baby, sneaking another drop of spirit water into Yaya's drink. Then I heard a commotion outside, a familiar, shrill voice.
Liu Kui.
Officers. This is the He house. He Xiangbei broke into our home last night and beat my mother and me. I looked out. Lu Chui stood at our gate, her face so swollen and bruised you could barely see her eyes. Behind her, Mrs. Feng lay on an ox cart. And behind them, 4 constables. He Xiangbei started toward the door. I stopped him and grabbed a broom from the wall instead. I charged straight at Lu Chui, screaming, "You have the nerve to show your face here after what you did to my sister-in-law? I'll beat you myself." This was calculated. I wanted the constables to see how furious we were about Yaya's treatment, to establish that we had every reason to want revenge and that the Lu family was the real villain. The constables rushed to hold me back. Lu Chui seized the moment.
See?
They're violent. They attack us right in front of you. I pointed at Mrs. Foam on the cart, crying real tears for effect. Officers, yesterday my husband and I saw this woman with our own eyes, beating her daughter-in-law who is still recovering from childbirth, forcing her to do heavy labor. She's the abuser. The constables could see my emotion was genuine. One of them turned to Lu Chui. Is what she's saying true? You didn't mention any of this when you filed your complaint. Lu Chui denied everything, but I shot back that their own neighbors had witnessed it all. The constable cut us both off. Enough. The magistrate will sort this out. Which one of you is He Xiangbei? He Xiangbei stepped forward calmly and bowed. That would be me. The Lu family has accused you of assault. Come with us to the courthouse. Neighbors had gathered to watch. Among them was Shuang Shuang, her face practically glowing with satisfaction. In her mind, this was following the exact path from her past life. He Xiangbei would be punished, injured, and eventually crippled. She couldn't wait to see me stuck with a broken man. What she didn't know was that this time, I had a plan. He Xiangbei played it perfectly. He looked the constables straight in the eye, completely calm. Officers, I came back from town yesterday and haven't left the village since. Whoever beat those 2 women, it wasn't me. The constables exchanged glances. In their years of experience, guilty men didn't act this relaxed. But they had orders from the magistrate, so they had to bring him in regardless. Before leaving, He Xiangbei pointed toward his mother's room. My sister, the Lu family's daughter-in-law, is in there recovering. She was abused during her postpartum recovery. She can barely get out of bed, and her baby nearly starved to death because she had no milk. If we're going to court, please verify what I'm saying first. The lead constable said it wouldn't be appropriate for men to examine a woman in confinement, but another constable mentioned he had a cousin living right here in the village, Andy Wang. She stepped out of the crowd immediately and volunteered, bringing several other women with her. They came back furious. Yaya's body was covered in bruises, old and new. She was skin and bones. The baby was so tiny and we could barely look alive. The women couldn't contain their outrage as they described everything to the constables. The constables' attitude toward Mrs. Feng and Lu Chui shifted visibly. He Xiangbei agreed to go to the courthouse, and I insisted on going too. He didn't argue. He'd already decided that if anything went wrong, he'd take all the blame himself. The county seat was a 2-hour walk. The constables had walked the whole way because their magistrate was so honest he'd spent all the department funds on helping poor citizens. The entire courthouse owned exactly 1 horse, and it just lived in the backyard like a pampered lord while everyone walked. Lu Chui was suffering. She'd already walked to the county to file her complaint, then walked back with the constables to our village, and now had to walk all the way to the county again. Her feet were blistered, and her legs were giving out. But she didn't dare ask to ride on the ox cart with her mother. She was afraid of annoying the constables. At Sunset Town, 1 constable broke off to interview Mrs. Feng's neighbors. At first they were reluctant. Everyone knew Mrs. Feng was vindictive. But the constable assured them their statements would only be seen by the magistrate. That opened the floodgates. The neighbors described everything they'd witnessed and even asked the constable to put in a good word for Yaya. When the constable returned with the testimony, he looked at Mrs. Feng and Lu Chui with undisguised disgust. Past the town, He Xiangbei noticed I was walking slower. He asked if I was tired. I wasn't. I had spirit spring water to keep my energy up. I'd slowed down because I'd noticed Lu Chui kept staring at my husband and drifting closer to him. I wanted to watch her. I smiled. I'm fine. He didn't buy it. He crouched down and put his hands behind his back.
Get on.
I'll carry you. That's really not. But before I could finish, he'd already scooped me onto his back and started walking. I could feel Lu Chui's jealous glare boring into us from behind.
Good.
I rode on He Xiangbei's back for a full hour, my face hot enough to fry an egg. Thankfully, it was getting dark and nobody could see how flustered I was. He walked just as fast carrying me as the constables walked unburdened. We reached Xiang County around sunset. Most vendors had packed up, but a few food stalls remained. My stomach growled loudly as we passed a wonton stand. Of course, He Xiangbei heard it. Are you hungry? I slid off his back, embarrassed. He suggested to the constables that everyone eat before heading to the courthouse. They agreed. He Xiangbei ordered wontons for us and paid for the constables' meals too. Lu Chui had to buy her own and her mother's. Mrs. Foam complained about our stinginess, saying we were practically family and should have treated them. One constable couldn't hold back. You're suing him and you expect him to buy you dinner? Mrs. Foam had nothing to say to that. At the courthouse, I expected we'd wait until morning, but the constable explained that their magistrate didn't follow set hours. As long as he was awake, he'd work. When the magistrate took his seat on the bench, I froze. I knew this man. His name was Gu Yuanji. In my past life, he'd risen to become the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the capital. He was famous throughout the entire city, incorruptible, fearless, and so honest he'd angered every powerful family in the capital. They tried repeatedly to destroy him, but the emperor himself protected him. He was the most upright official I'd ever known of. And here he was, young and still serving as a humble county magistrate. What incredible luck. He Xiangbei nudged me when I didn't respond to the order to state my name. I snapped out of it. Su Yunwan from Manhwa Village, Sunset Town, Mrs. Foam immediately started wailing about her injuries before anyone asked. The bailiff shouted for order, and she shut up fast. Magistrate Gu asked her directly, did she actually see He Xiangbei break in and attack her? She hesitated. She wanted to lie, but she could feel the weight of his authority. If she claimed to have seen him, she'd have screamed during the attack, and the neighbors would have heard. The constables had just collected testimony from those neighbors. If they all said they'd heard nothing, her lie would collapse. So she fell back on motive. He and his wife came to my house yesterday and took my daughter-in-law. They have a grudge against us. Lu Chui chimed in. We have no enemies besides them. It must have been him. I noticed Lu Chui sneaking admiring glances at Magistrate Gu through her swollen eyes. She thought he was handsome. How ridiculous. Magistrate Gu slammed his gavel. This is absurd. You come to my court with no evidence. Only guesswork? Do you think this is a game? I knew that normally, Gu Yuanji would investigate further. He'd gather his own evidence and ask us for alibis. But something about his tone suggested he already knew which side deserved his sympathy. What I didn't know until later was that Magistrate Gu had already read the neighbor's testimony before he even sat down. And the case hit close to home for him. His own mother had been brutalized by his grandmother during confinement. His grandmother had starved his mother, beaten her, and forced her to do heavy labor. His baby sister had died before she was a month old because his mother had no milk. Mrs. Feng's cruelty was an almost exact mirror of what his family had suffered. That's why he'd been so quick to dismiss Mrs. Feng's complaint. He caught himself and tried to be more professional about it, asking her for specifics. What time did the attack happen? What weapon was used? Lu Chui saw her chance to impress the handsome magistrate. She pulled off her shoe and held it up. He used this shoe to beat my face. The stench hit everyone like a wall. I was kneeling right next to her and could barely breathe. He Xiangbei leaned away. The constables grimaced. Even the magistrate coughed. He asked He Xiangbei if he'd used that shoe. My husband looked at it with pure disgust. Your Honor, that shoe smells so bad I'd never touch it. Why would I pick that up to hit someone? The court clerk chimed in from behind his hand. Your Honor, I agree with the defendant. There are many ways to punish someone. Nobody would choose a shoe that smells like that. The constable's lips were twitching with suppressed laughter. Lu Chui insisted the sole's pattern matched the marks on her face. The magistrate sent a constable to check. The poor man walked over, took one look from as far away as possible, then jumped back several feet. Your Honor, I don't see any shoe prints. The magistrate slammed his gavel. You dare make a mockery of this court. Lu Chui put her shoe back on fast. Even when Mrs. Feng argued that He Xiangbei was the only person with a motive, the magistrate circled back to the core problem. No evidence. He asked He Xiangbei where he was last night. At home, all night. Who can prove it? I spoke up immediately. I can. My husband was with me the entire night. The magistrate turned to Mrs. Feng.
He has a witness.
Unless you have new evidence, this case is closed. I could tell Magistrate Gu had already figured out what probably happened. He Xiangbei was the most obvious suspect. But after reading about what Mrs. Feng had done to Yaya, he believed she deserved far worse than what she got. If his own mother had had a brother willing to stand up for her, she wouldn't have spent her life suffering. Mrs. Feng tried to protest further, but the constables started pounding their staffs on the floor, a clear warning. She went silent. Then He Xiangbei bowed his head to the floor. Your Honor, my sister was nearly killed by this woman's abuse. My infant niece almost starved to death. I beg you to deliver justice for them. This time, the magistrate didn't hesitate. He reviewed the testimony carefully, every word, and saw his own mother's story playing out again. He slammed the gavel. This is monstrous. I will not tolerate such cruelty in my county. Guards, take Mrs. Feng outside and give her 20 strikes of the heavy rod. Lu Chui got lucky. The neighbor's testimony focused on Mrs. Feng, so she escaped punishment this time. Mrs. Feng screamed for mercy. She was already injured, and 20 strikes would kill her. Lu Chui begged too, suddenly finding the handsome magistrate not so charming anymore. Magistrate Gu paused, then delivered his solution. Since Mrs. Feng was too injured for punishment, her daughter would take the 20 strikes instead. Lu Chui nearly lost control of her bladder. I never hit my sister-in-law. You can't punish me. He ignored her protests. 2 constables dragged her out. The screaming from outside was horrifying. By the time they finished, Lu Chui had passed out. The magistrate ordered her doused with cold water, then had both mother and daughter dumped on a street corner away from the courthouse. We bowed and thanked him. I thought that was the end of it. Then Magistrate Gu said something unexpected. He Xiangbei, stay. I have something to say to you. We exchanged confused looks. I went outside to wait. When He Xiangbei came out, he looked dazed. On the road, he told me what Magistrate Gu had said privately. Next time you do something like this, don't be so hasty. Wait a few days before acting, and you won't draw this kind of trouble. The magistrate had known all along that He Xiangbei was the one who'd beaten them. He'd deliberately covered for us. I couldn't figure out why. The Gu Yuanji I knew from my past life was the most rigid, by-the-book official in the entire capital. Why would he knowingly hide the truth and protect my husband? He Xiangbei swore he'd never met the man before. I couldn't make sense of it, so I let it go. Whatever his reasons, the magistrate had helped us, and that was what mattered. It was late, but we decided to walk home through the night rather than stay at an inn. Grandma was moving tomorrow, and our family would worry if we didn't come back. The road stretched ahead like a dark ribbon through dense forest. Wind howled through the trees. My hands turned cold, not from the temperature, but from nerves. He Xiangbei noticed, took off his outer jacket and wrapped it around me. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Those simple words settled something in my chest. I felt safe. To pass the time, I started telling him the story of Legend of the White Snake, the tale I planned for him to write as our first storybook. But I'd barely started when he suddenly grabbed me and pulled me into the trees beside the road. I understood immediately and went silent, even slowing my breathing. Then I heard it too, the clash of weapons. Someone was fighting nearby. The sounds grew closer. A voice shouted, "Kill them! Don't let them escape!" Behind us in the forest, footsteps were crashing through the undergrowth, heading straight toward us. Scumbag tried to pull me away, but just as we stood up, someone collapsed at our feet. A hand grabbed my ankle with surprising strength. A broken voice begged, "Please, save me." The grip loosened, and the person passed out. We wanted to run. This wasn't our fight. But before we could take a step, two more figures came crashing through the trees. A young boy, maybe a teenager, was fleeing from a masked man in black wielding a large blade. The boy collapsed right at my feet, and the sword swung straight toward me. Scumbag threw himself between us. The blade caught him across the shoulder. "Husband!" I screamed. In that split second, I made my decision. Scumbag had taken a sword meant for me. If Li Zian, the worst man I'd ever known, had been allowed to enjoy the space's benefits, then Scumbag, who nearly died protecting me, absolutely deserved it too.
He was a good man.
And what was the point of having a miraculous space if I didn't use it when it mattered most? But before I could act, Scumbag shook off the pain. He kicked the blade from the attacker's hand, picked it up, and killed him with one strike. We could hear more people approaching, footsteps and horses this time. A lot of them. I looked at Scumbag's blood-soaked shoulder, then at the two unconscious strangers on the ground. I made a choice. I'm taking you somewhere safe. I'll explain everything once we're there. Before he could ask what I meant, the world around us changed. Warm air, daylight, green grass. We were inside the jade pendant space. Through the floating window above, we could hear voices outside. Search everywhere. They must be nearby. I pressed my hand to my chest. If I'd hesitated even a moment longer, we'd all be dead. Scumbag looked around, stunned. What is this place? I gave each of the two unconscious strangers a drop of spirit spring water to keep them alive, then brought Scumbag to the grass hut by the river. While I cleaned his wound, I told him everything: the jade pendant, the blood bond, the space, and all its wonders. His reaction was the same as Grandma's. After the shock passed, he said, "This place is too powerful. You must never tell anyone else. Having a treasure like this can be deadly. I know. Only you, me, and Grandma know. No one else ever will." I mixed spirit spring water with wound medicine and applied it to his shoulder. I'd figured out this combination in my past life. Neither worked fast alone, but together they healed wounds at an incredible rate. Then I gave him a small amount of diluted spring water to drink. I couldn't give him the full dose yet. Purging toxins from his body while he had an open wound would only make things worse. That could wait until he healed. The color returned to his face almost immediately. The dizziness from blood loss was gone, and the pain was fading. Then he looked at the two unconscious strangers on the ground and said what I was already thinking: "Those two can't stay here. If they wake up, your secret is exposed." I wasn't being reckless when I saved those two strangers. Before pulling everyone into the space, I'd noticed a jade token on the older man, one I recognized from my past life. It belonged to the heir of the Pingyang marquis household, Lin Yuchen, Li Zian's twin brother. In my previous life, Lin Yuchen had died young, killed alongside the crown prince during an outing. That teenager on the ground was very likely the crown prince himself. By saving them, I may have changed both their fates. But my real motivation was simpler and more personal. As long as Lin Yuchen stayed alive, the Pingyang marquis household would never need to find a replacement heir, which meant they'd never come looking for Li Zian. He and Shuang would be stuck in their miserable village life forever. No noble title, no wealth, no power. That was my revenge, not through violence, but by simply keeping the real heir alive. I couldn't explain any of this to Scumbag, so I just said I thought they looked like good people and wanted to help. He accepted that without question. Before approaching them, I grabbed sleeping powder from the storage room, enough to keep someone unconscious for at least 5 hours, and harmless to the body. We couldn't risk them waking up inside the space. Scumbag insisted on examining their wounds himself. When I moved to undress the older man, my husband stepped in immediately. "I'll do it. You just tell me what to do." He even reminded me to look away when he reached the lower body. The injuries were horrifying. The older man had deep gashes across his chest, inner thigh, and back, 7 or 8 cuts down to the bone on his back alone. He Xiangbei quietly doubted the man would survive even in a proper clinic. But he didn't say it out loud, and just followed my instructions. I'd already given each of them a drop of spirit spring water when we first arrived. Without it, the older man would have bled out and died. Now He Xiangbei cleaned their wounds, applied the spirit water and medicine mixture, and bandaged everything. He got better at it as he went. By the time he reached the teenager, he didn't need my guidance at all. After about 2 hours of work, He Xiangbei glanced up at the floating window and frowned. It was still dark outside. We'd left the county seat late at night, walked for an hour, and had been inside the space for at least 2 or 3 hours. It should have been dawn by now. "Why is it still dark outside?" he asked. I smiled. I'd been waiting for him to notice. I realized I'd rushed the explanation earlier, so I told He Xiangbei about the time difference properly. 1 day outside equals 10 days in here. The 2 or 3 hours we've spent inside. Only a few minutes have passed in the real world. His eyes went wide. I could see him trying to process it. His new wife had a pocket dimension where time moved 10 times slower. He'd never believed in gods or magic, but what else could explain this? Once he understood we had plenty of time, the tension left his shoulders. We could even sleep here and still make it home before dawn. I asked him to wash the 2 strangers' faces so we could see who they were. He cleaned the teenager first and paused, clearly impressed. The boy was strikingly handsome. Fine features, elegant brows, a face that balanced youthful energy with quiet maturity. He Xiangbei actually stared for a moment, then his eyes fixed on something specific, the boy's ears. They were shaped like gold ingots, unusual and distinctive. The exact same shape as mine. I noticed it too. Looking at the boy's face stirred an odd feeling of warmth and familiarity, though I couldn't explain why. I told myself it was just because he was good-looking. Then He Xiangbei wiped the older man's face and jumped back.
Li Zian?
How can this be Li Zian? I already knew the truth from my past life. This was Lin Yuchen, Li Zian's twin brother, the real heir of the Pingyang marquis. The only difference between them was a small mole above Lin Yuchen's upper lip. But I couldn't reveal how I knew that. It would raise too many questions about my relationship with Li Zian. So I played dumb. "How is that possible?" I said, acting shocked. I silently hoped He Xiangbei would spot the mole himself. He did, within moments. "Wait, this isn't Li Zian. There's a mole above his lip. Li Zian doesn't have one." I kept playing innocent. "Then who is he?" He Xiangbei puzzled over it. 2 men who looked identical had to be twins. But he'd known Li Zian since childhood. There'd never been any talk of twins in the Li family. I gave him a nudge, pointing out the jade token. He found it among the torn clothing. One side was engraved with Pingyang, the other with Qin. "Could he be from the Pingyang marquis household?" he murmured. He knew about the family from eavesdropping on storytellers at tea houses as a child. With that connection made, I shared my next piece. Before the engagement swap, I overheard Shuang telling her mother about a recurring dream, that Li Zian was actually a lost son of the Pingyang marquis. I left the rest for him to work out. He went straight to the key conclusion. "You're saying Li Zian really might be a lost heir of the marquis household." I noticed he didn't waste a single breath asking about Shuang's motives for the swap. He truly had never cared about her at all. Most men would be bothered by being rejected by their fiancé. He hadn't given it a second thought. He looked troubled, though. Whatever the truth about Li Zian's origins, he had no desire to get entangled in the dangerous politics of noble families. "Let's get them to an inn in town," He Xiangbei said. I agreed completely. We'd done our part. As long as Lin Yuchen survived, Li Zian would never be claimed by the marquis household. The rest could play out on its own. We checked through the floating window to make sure the coast was clear, then left the space. The walk to Sunset Town was uneventful. He Xiangbei found a small inn and paid for 2 days. I brought the 2 men out of the space, and we laid them on the bed. They were still unconscious from the sleeping powder. Without it, the spirit spring water would have woken them long ago. We were halfway out the door when a weak voice stopped us. "Was it you who saved me?" It was the boy. His eyes were open, bright and clear despite everything. The sleeping powder had worn off faster than I'd expected. The smart thing was to walk away and never look back. But something about those eyes made me hesitate. I couldn't explain it. I kept it brief. Your wounds have been treated. This is an inn in Sunset Town. We've paid for 2 nights. The rest is up to you. As we left, I could hear him calling after us, thanking us, asking who we were so he could repay us someday. I didn't answer. We made it home just before dawn. Mrs. Su was awake and waiting. She rushed out the moment she heard the gate and was visibly relieved to learn the magistrate had punished Mrs. Foam instead of Scumbag. She didn't press for details, just told us to rest. We only had about an hour before we needed to get up and help Grandma move. So I pulled Scumbag into the space. Now that he knew about it, not using the time difference would be foolish. I was exhausted. I washed up quickly and collapsed onto the big, soft bed in the restroom. Scumbag, meanwhile, was too curious to sleep. I let him explore on his own. What touched me was where he went. He didn't even glance at the treasure warehouse. He said later that as a man, relying on his wife's wealth wasn't something he'd do. Earning a living was his responsibility. Instead, he went straight to the library. 3 floors of books, all perfectly organized by category. The first 2 floors had everything imaginable: poetry, music, chess, painting, calligraphy, basic texts, advanced exam preparation, medical books, and martial arts manuals. The 3rd floor was all storybooks, many with beautiful illustrations he immediately recognized would make them far more valuable than ordinary copies. He browsed the martial arts section on the 2nd floor and pulled out a book called Introduction to Light Body Techniques. But he only sat and read it. He didn't practice anything. In his mind, these were my belongings, and he wouldn't use them without permission. If I'd known that at the time, I would have compared him to Li Zian on the spot. When Li Zian first learned about the space, he'd gone straight to the treasure vault, ready to grab the most valuable items and sell them. Scumbag didn't even look at the vault. The difference between those 2 men couldn't be wider. Thinking about Li Zian and the space always makes me angry. In my past life, he'd taken books from the library without asking and lent them to his old classmates. Many never came back. He'd given away spirit spring water like it was worthless, and nearly brought disaster on us because of it. The contrast with Scumbag couldn't be sharper. When I woke up in the space, Scumbag was sleeping soundly beside me. My stomach was growling. We'd been inside for hours by space-time, and I hadn't stored any food here yet. Note to self: stock the space with provisions soon. He woke up hungry too, so we left the space and quietly made breakfast in the real-world kitchen while everyone else slept. A few flatbreads with pickled vegetables, and we finally had full stomachs. Back in our room, I couldn't help testing him a little. I turned into a walking questionnaire. Did you see the treasures in the warehouse? No. I didn't go in. Why not? Everything in there looks priceless. With my current status, I have no business touching any of it. I was stunned. Li Zian had made a beeline for the treasure vault the moment he'd learned about the space. Scumbag hadn't even looked. He admitted sheepishly that he'd spent his time in the library instead, browsing the storybooks on the 3rd floor and a martial arts manual on the 2nd. He'd noticed the storybooks had beautiful illustrations, something that would make them far more appealing than the plain copies he was used to writing. And the martial arts book? Just personal interest. He'd loved martial arts since childhood, but never had a way to learn. I told him the space was his too. He could study any martial art he wanted, anytime he wanted. His face lit up like a boy who'd been handed the world's best gift. Really? I can learn those techniques. Learn whatever you want. I laid out my plan. After helping Grandma move today, we'd buy food to stock the space. Then each evening we could go inside. 1 night in the real world meant days of study time inside. He could also copy a storybook from the library to sell as our first real income together. We agreed to stop thanking each other constantly. We were family now. Too much politeness felt like distance. By dawn, his grandparents showed up at our gate, having barely slept from worrying about his arrest. They were relieved to see him safe. Next door, the familiar sound of Mrs. Zhao screaming at Shuang Shuang drifted over the wall. Nobody in our family even bothered to listen anymore. After breakfast, Scumbag and I headed to the old Su house to help Grandma move to her new home. Mrs. Su and Xiaoxiao went ahead to Grandma's new courtyard to clean everything up so she could just move her things right in. When he Xiangbei and I arrived at the old Su house, Ingxue was already there helping carry things out. She'd come early thinking we might still be at the courthouse. My uncle and aunt stood in their doorway watching with cold expressions, clearly hoping we hadn't come back. When they saw us safe and sound, Aunt Lu just pursed her lips and dragged my uncle back inside. Grandma didn't have much. 2 bundles of belongings, a big iron pot, some bowls and chopsticks, an old wardrobe, and a few pieces of furniture. He Xiangbei moved everything by himself without breaking a sweat, loaded it all onto a wooden cart, and we were done. At the new house, Mrs. Su and Xiaoxiao were waiting to help arrange everything. Grandma was so grateful, and she privately thanked Shuang too, in a way. If that girl hadn't demanded the engagement swap, this wonderful family would never have become part of our lives. Grandma had heard the village gossip about Shuang's miserable days at the Li house, constant scolding from Mrs. Zhao Li Zian openly showing his contempt. Grandma felt a twinge of sadness. Shuang was still her granddaughter, but the girl was rotten to the core, just like her mother, and nothing could change that. So Grandma decided to stop worrying and focus on her own life while she still had it. Ingxue stayed for lunch, Grandma's first meal in her new home. Mrs. Su and Xiaoxiao came too. Grandma cooked 4 dishes herself, and it felt like a real celebration. Afterward, I told Grandma about the court case, leaving out the dangerous parts about the ambush and He Xiangbei's injury. I also told her that He Xiangbei now knew about the space. She approved completely. Keeping a secret that big from your husband would only breed suspicion. That afternoon, we all entered the space together. He Xiangbei's shoulder wound had already scabbed over thanks to the spirit spring water. He helped Grandma prepare the half-acre of spirit farmland, and I decided to plant corn first. In my past life, this same plot had produced an astonishing 500 pounds of corn, yields unheard of in our country. Li Zian had selfishly hoarded the seeds for years, only releasing them to the public when he needed political points as a governor. This time, I do things differently. After the harvest, I take the seeds to Magistrate Gu and get them distributed to farmers across the region. People would benefit from this right away. He Xiangbei planted all the corn seeds following my instructions, and Grandma finally relaxed. A farmer at heart, she couldn't stand seeing good land sitting empty. Grandma went to rest by the river. He Xiangbei headed to the library to study martial arts. Now that he had my permission, he could practice freely. And I picked up the storybook, Legend of the White Snake, to review. Our family lived better than most villagers, but we were still just a farming household. Hunting and book copying covered daily expenses, but saving money was nearly impossible. I needed to get my money-making plans moving soon. Now that He Xiangbei knew about the space, there was no point hiding my abilities anymore. He was deep into studying martial arts, so I sat down in the library and started copying Legend of the White Snake myself, in my best calligraphy, the elegant style I'd spent decades perfecting in my past life. He Xiangbei wandered over eventually and watched over my shoulder. I had no idea you could write this beautifully. I shrugged it off as practice. He didn't question it after learning about the space. Nothing about me could really surprise him anymore. Then he sat across from me, picked up a brush, and started copying the illustrations from the original book. His drawings were nearly perfect replicas. He suggested we include them in our version of the story. I smacked my own forehead. Of course. Illustrated storybooks would be far more appealing. Why hadn't I thought of that? So we divided the work. I wrote the text, he drew the pictures. Grandma cooked for us. We'd brought food into the space, knowing we'd be there for the equivalent of several days. Meanwhile, at the inn in Sunset Town, the 2 men we'd saved were having a much harder time. They'd woken up but were in too much pain to move. I hadn't been able to give them as much spirit water as I'd given He Xiangbei. They lay there all day without food or water, unable to even get up to relieve themselves. The teenager's name was Jun Haoran. He was the crown prince. And the man who looked like Li Zian was indeed Lin Yuchen, heir to the Pingyang marquis. Eventually, the marquis household's secret guards tracked them down and took care of their needs. Lin Yuchen urged the prince to return to the capital, but Jun Haoran refused. He wanted to stay and find the people who'd saved them, especially the beautiful older sister, who'd stirred an inexplicable feeling of warmth and familiarity in him. He sent his remaining guards out with descriptions of our faces, ordering them to find us no matter what. Back in the space, we finished the first half of Legend of the White Snake by evening. I brought everyone out before Mrs. Su could notice anything strange. Tomorrow we'd take the manuscript to the Sunrise bookstore. At home after dinner, Xiangbei was eager to get back into the space to keep studying. While checking whether the household had gone to sleep, he overheard a conversation through the wall that made him freeze. Li Zihuan was begging Li Zian to let him sleep with Shuang again. It was only 2 nights, brother. She might not be pregnant yet. Let me try some more. Li Zian refused, his voice icy. He couldn't stand listening to them together anymore. Li Zihuan pulled out his trump card. If you don't agree, I'll tell your wife about your condition. The secret that Li Zian had been born without the ability to be a man, and that his own brother had been his stand-in on Shuang's wedding nights, was being used as blackmail right next door. Xiangbei and I were in the space practicing martial arts when we heard screaming from outside. We'd been learning light body techniques together. This time around, I was young enough to train properly instead of settling for just one fighting style like in my past life. We rushed out of the space to find Mrs. Su and Xiao already standing in the courtyard, staring toward the Li house. The screaming was Shuang's voice, so loud it had woken up neighbors several houses away, including Grandma. What I didn't know until later was the full story of what had been happening next door. Earlier that evening, before we'd entered the space, Xiangbei had accidentally overheard Li Zian and Li Zihuan arguing through the wall. Li Zihuan was pressuring his brother to let him sleep with Shuang again, threatening to expose Li Zian's secret, that he'd been born without the ability to function as a man. Li Zian had no choice but to give in. He used the last of the sleeping powder to drug Shuang, then had Li Zihuan carry her to his own room. But tonight, the drug wore off too early. Shuang woke up mid-act and found Li Zihuan on top of her instead of Li Zian. Her scream could have shattered glass. Li Zian, alone in his room, instantly understood the catastrophe. If this got out, 2 secrets would be exposed. His wife's affair with his brother and, far worse, the reason it was happening in the first place. He made a ruthless calculation in seconds. Between being known as a cuckold or being exposed as physically defective, he chose the lesser humiliation. He kicked his door open, stormed into Li Zihuan's room, and started shouting at Shuang for all the neighbors to hear. You shameless woman! Sleeping with another man, and under your own husband's roof. He was framing her, pinning everything on her to protect his own secret. Shuang, who had been the victim of a scheme she didn't even know existed, sat there crying, her world collapsing around her. She'd thought she was sleeping with her brilliant future marquis husband every night. Instead, it had been his younger brother all along. Standing in our courtyard, listening to the chaos next door, I felt nothing for her. After everything she'd done to me in my past life, this was exactly the kind of bitter fruit she deserved to taste.